Hello, everyone. Welcome to Knights of Last Call. My name is Derik Melinda, joined tonight by just Aaron.
Hello.
Just Mr. Smith. Bob is a cough, and he said it would be rather unpleasant for all of us to be part of that. And so Bob is at home resting. Hopefully enjoying yourself, Bob. But that's okay, because tonight we're going to be talking about the old school. And Smith and I have a nice little collection of books here on the table, representing some of our favorite old school games, or I should say new old school games in some cases.
Yeah, some of these were just ones I had in my backpack. But
there you go.
I do got the respectable rule cyclopedia here. So
oh yes, which for a long time for us was like the kind of the holy grail.
This is still like one of my favorite books, just in general. I mean, this is like the complete D&D package,
right?
Which is super cool, right? So
yeah, I mean,
still very much love it.
And it's funny too, because I can actually see there. So over here, I have my copy of OSE.
Oh yeah.
And this is the individual 5 books.
Yeah, I got.
But you have basically the rules compendium version of OSE, right? Which is
I like this because it's kind of like a real cleaned up version of it. So like, if I ever just want to bust out some basic, I mean
that book right there, and that nice little digest size book. I mean, that is a lot of gaming.
That's a lot of gaming right here
that you get out of that one book.
Yeah. Great product.
Yeah, and so obviously Bob does not have the same sort of history or relationship with old school gaming as Aaron and I do, because Aaron and I started playing in the early 90s, and these games were out, and we had this sort of that was kind of what we grew up with. And in my particular instance, I was taught to play by my cousin and my uncle, who grew up playing basically BX and first edition AD&D.
For years I got to play with you and your uncle too.
That's right.
That was awesome.
Yeah, and so but one of the things that I think that's been kind of interesting, and I'll be honest with you, what really spurred I think a lot of this conversation was 2 games. So one of them is Dragonbane, which has just become extremely popular in our community. And the second is, of course, Hackmaster, which, we kind of just randomly started talking about. I don't even remember why we started talking about it, but
initiative systems.
I
feel like you can't discuss initiative without talking about Hackmaster.
You're absolutely right. We did a thing on initiative systems, and I said we have to talk about the count, the count up. And, these games are both old school adjacent.
Yes.
And yet, and you have been reading through your Hackmaster games, and you were sort of been struck by some of the feelings and, ideas and interests that you've been having as you read through this. And I myself have asked my patrons many, many times, which is, and I'm not being dismissive here, but I know. Why are you all like this game so much?
Right.
I'm not saying anything bad about the game. I think it's great. I don't understand, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, and we can talk about with you all here in the chat, is I just don't understand why this game at this time has grabbed these people so hard. And now you might say, well, it's because, they were playing, very crunchy, balanced games like Pathfinder 2, but it's like, okay, but OSE, Shadow Dark, Labyrinth Lord, all of these games have been out for many, many years.
I know we have big fans of OSE on the Discord. When I think they were coming out with the advanced version of this, there was a lot of talk about it. This is the real-time torch system, I think.
This is the real-time torch system.
This was getting talked about on our Discord. I don't know if it was being talked about favorably, but it got talked about.
Well, it's definitely, but there's a lot of these kind of what we'll talk about new SR games versus OSR games. Right. And sort of some of the understanding of that, because a big part of what I am trying to get at is do people, like when I read some old school games and I feel like I'm enjoying it, is it just nostalgia? Or do I legitimately enjoy this? Because one of the things that you and I have come to terms with, it's been tough for us, but one of the things that you and I have come to terms with over the years is that when we sit down to play a old OSR game, whether it's literally busting out, BX D&D, right? I'm talking little red book here, okay? Just like actual, basically what 90% of these games on this table here are based off of.
Yeah.
But when we've played this, or when we've played Adventurer Conqueror King system, when we've played, and when we've set up a whole campaign for that.
This book, I mean, because this is getting to what you're talking about. this book is so bittersweet for me, right? Because this was everything I ever really wanted from D&D. And then when I got what I wanted, I didn't want it.
Correct. Right. I mean, that's the classic, Oscar Wilde, right? Says there's two great tragedies in life, 100%, right? Not getting what you want and getting
what you want. Yeah.
And so one of the things that we've come to the conclusion of is that we sit down to play these games and we really enjoy them and they're fun, but we lose interest.
We do.
And it usually takes like 3 or 4 or 5 sessions, but we start kind of looking at what the game, how the game is progressing and what
are we actually doing? What's the game? What's just us?
Yeah, exactly.
And you and I particularly are notorious overthinkers, right?
Correct. So, I mean, obviously that should be no surprise to anyone who is watching this channel.
100%. Right. And that's why, like for example, could I believe Bob could play Dragonbane for 5 years and beyond? 100%. Because I'm not trying to diss Bob, but like Bob, Bob isn't the guy that's going to sit there and like break apart.
Absolutely.
Like, why did I have fun? And how much fun did I actually have?
Yeah.
And how much effort did I put in to have that fun?
Absolutely.
For you, that's like, you and I, that's like dinner and dessert, right?
If you were on our Sunday stream, our special super secret Sunday stream, one of the things I talked about is, and a patron actually, Beowulf, kind of like called me. I was like, Derik, I think it was Beowulf. He was like, Derik, are you doing that thing that you were talking about on Sunday where you analyze the fun out of a game? And I said, oh, absolutely. Because
this is what we do.
Yeah, this is what we do. And in particular, obviously we started a Forbidden Lands campaign. And this is, I would say, new SR, in the sense that this idea is that these games, you had the original OSR, which were literally just copies of the old school game.
To be clear, you have old school. Then you have OSR.
True.
And now you have new OSR.
Right. Or new sir or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
And, this is obviously a new school Renaissance type game inspired with sort of that kind of caveat. And I remember I was reading like the encumbrance rules and I was like posting it to the patrons. And I said, I got some problems with the encumbrance rules, specifically with the over encumbrance rules. And they're like, oh, and I was like, well, here's the rules. Here's the paragraph that's in the book. Tell me the 5 things that are potentially problematic with this. And everyone looked and they're like, I don't know.
I actually don't remember the rules for this in this game.
Well, and again, sometimes it's one of those like I don't even want to call it nitpicking, but like one of the things is like if you're over encumbered, meaning you're carrying more than you can encumber, you have to make an endurance check.
Okay.
At the end of a day of hiking.
Okay.
Okay. But there's no limit.
Well, I mean, what happens if you fail the check?
Well, you take a point of agility damage, but more important, well, that's also one of the problems.
Okay.
But are you 5 over, 10 over, 25 over, a billion over? There is no limit. And even if there were some sort of practical limit,
it's if you're over, you just make a check.
If you're over, you make a check. And there's also no like, and again, this is me analyzing the game to a very extreme degree. And this is also where I said, okay, so let me get this straight. If you hike while you're over encumbered, let's say your GM is not a complete idiot and doesn't let you carry a billion extra things. So you go, okay, I'm carrying 5 extra stuff.
Right.
Is that enough? Sure, why not? Okay.
Playing Mother May. I don't know how much is too much.
Now, of course, there's no penalty to your check.
Right.
So it's not if you're 1 over or 5 over, it's just make a check.
Unless again the GM is like covering for the whole system at this point.
Correct. So you make the check. And when you fail the check, if you pass the check, great, you can wike. If you fail the check, you either have to drop excess weight. Okay. You can't move, like you're stuck there. If you don't want to just like leave your equipment behind, then you don't get to move. Or you can take a point of agility damage. And I'm like, okay, so if I'm a weak character,
right,
and I have really high agility,
right,
I could carry way more stuff.
Yeah.
Hike for 2.
So why is it agility?
Because agility is what they associate with the move skill.
I see.
And so the point is, though, it's like, okay, so I was at 6 agility. I'm way over encumbered. Do you have any ranks in endurance? Hell no. I know. My strength is 3.
Right.
Fail the check. I'll take a point of agility. I'm still 5.
Yeah.
A quarter day later, I'm still at 4. I failed the check. I'm at 4. Cool. I rest. I get it all back.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people were
that completely just destroys the entire survival aspect of the game.
100%. And I was like, and everybody, now, but here's the thing. For me, it did, because everybody else is like, that would never happen
What do you
in
mean that
my
would
game
never happen?
in a million years. They were all very
You
adamant.
loot some treasure or something. You just did it.
They were all very. The idea that they would even have to be making a check would be enough negative pressure for them to not want to do it. It's very strange.
You need to make checks in that game. I don't understand.
So
you can't play that game unless you're making checks and failing them at that.
well, pushing.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, my point is, this is like this, but it's one of those games where it's like, Tortuga DM Studio says I would abuse the crap out of that.
Yeah, who wouldn't?
And I'm not, and I'm actually gonna.
I'll throw one out there.
I'm gonna put a target on me here really quick.
It actually almost makes sense though. Think about it. When you were on the trail. Would you say at the end of the day of hiking, you were a little tired from your encumbrance?
Well, actually, so this no. This is actually something that I really broke down, assuming that you used a system that made more sense, which this is not. Your encumbrance value represents the amount of weight that you can carry, where walking all day with that literally doesn't tax you.
Yeah.
That would be like me having like a backpack on, just like a normal backpack.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my like if I was at Gen Con and I just had my backpack on with like,
nothing in it.
A bottle of water and a snack, pack of Cliff Bars.
Not these books.
Not these books. And I was like, that was never me when I was hiking on the Appalachian
how much
Trail.
were you carrying on the trail?
I said I was definitely over encumbered.
Yeah.
And I said, and so every hour I would hike, I would take damage.
Yeah.
And then but the thing is, as long as I didn't take in too much damage, if I got a good night's sleep, I would be good to go the next day. Yeah. So there is an element of that which makes a certain amount of sense.
You still couldn't carry infinite amount of stuff.
I still could not carry infinite amount of stuff, which is why I was like, there should be some sort of relationship. In fact, again, the system, which I did not create, was for each point, for each slot of endurance, for each slot of encumbrance over your limit.
Yeah.
After you hike for 6 hours, for each slot above, it does that much damage to your strength.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You make an endurance check. For each success you get, for each 6, it cancels out one of those points of damage. Yeah. So if you're carrying a shitload of weight, it will like basically immediately destroy you.
Yeah, it'll just drop you.
But if you're kind of like, I'm okay with getting a little worn down over the course of this long day, as long as I'm going to be able to get a good night's sleep, I will be fine the next day. But then there were instances and times on the Appalachian Trail where I basically broke, and I was like, I need to like get off the trail.
Take a 0 day.
I need to take a 0 day. I need to like really recover,
Yeah.
And so anyways, but again,
I mean, most of that rule is okay. It's just the no limit part is what kind of breaks it.
And so this is where it's like, but this is an OSR game or a new OSR game.
Well, and specifically focus on survival. That part's a little weird.
Correct. But it's also like, I mean, I'll pick on myself here. Like, it's shit like that and people like me, which is why we got Pathfinder 2. Because it was like, well, you need a rule for everything and you got to prevent people from abusing it.
I mean, yes and no. I see your point. I see where you're going. I'm not really going to argue it, but I do feel that that's something that was silly to overlook.
Agreed. I mean, look, obviously I agree. I wanted to change it. But the other thing about it is,
like, you shouldn't be able to like have this loophole that like, completely invalidates half the game.
Well, and this goes back to our Sunday condition. This was really comes back to the OSR because, one of the things that we talked about yesterday, and again, for those of you who missed it, I basically said, that Mark Rosewater talked about how don't confuse interesting with fun. And I think that games should be both fun and interesting. Almost all of them are some mix. Mm-hmm. And obviously the unicorn is a game that is fun and interesting, right?
And not complex.
Okay. But not complex, right? Because the problem is usually when you make a game interesting, you make the game more complicated and complex. So that is a price. Because, for example, you could say this is the greatest game that's ever made. It is incredibly fun and it is incredibly complex.
That would be this game here, by the way. Because it says in the book it's the greatest game ever made.
But you as a person or you as a group may not be willing to pay the price of complexity.
Right.
And so I've said, my personal opinion, based off of our experiences in playing these older school games, is I have said, I think these games are fun, but they don't have the complexity to be interesting in the long term. Mm-hmm. So when people enjoy the old school approach, is it because what they're really looking for is a fun game that doesn't tax them intellectually, that is much more of an emotional experience? And then for us, right, when we look back at these games and we look at some of these newer school games, I think for a lot of people who have been playing these really hyper complicated games, it's like a breath of fresh air. But for our situation, it's a little bit different, right? Because we played a lot of these different games.
Right.
So when we look at OSR and we get excited about these books, what is it that we're getting excited about? Is it just nostalgia? Is it just remembering what it used to be like? Is it a feeling of, I don't know, of being 13 years old and fighting
this is what we're talking about
fighting a troll for the first time, you know? And how much of this game is you know, and again, these games like Shadow Dark and stuff, $1 million Kickstarter.
100%.
Yeah. And so there Mork Björg is now been like, there's like hacks of hacks.
Yeah. I can't even keep track of
there's this cultural movement towards making games, I would say, more fun, less interesting.
Well, you know, as with everything, context is key, right? And I think there's a few important things to keep in mind. And this is actually would have been great to have Ben on the stream, actually, because he's got 10 years on us and might have a different perspective than ours with these old school games, right? Because I was going to say, you know, I do think how we grew up definitely impacts how we view these games and what we kind of looked to get out of them. And, you know, nowadays, you know, because of the channel and the Patreon and stuff like that, we're a lot more like self-aware of, you know, hey, why am I playing this? Like, what bias am I bringing into this?
Right.
That's not your typical player, right?
No, most people are not thinking about that stuff.
Right. So I say that with when we get into the old school stuff, I think it's important to frame, you know, what we thought we were getting out of it, right? And then to address your second point about the new stuff, you know, so many people in the hobby now are new, right? They came in with 5th edition.
Right.
And so for them, this is like I don't know, it's like the first time you decided to go down your family tree and look up your ancestors.
Correct.
Right?
There's a returning to your roots kind of exploration of this. And I guess the other appeal of this, and hey, we did just got a super chat. Thank you, Grimlocked. As complexity goes up, your mass appeal drops. I think by and large that is true. You know, and I think that like complexity is not always a great way to get into people's, you know, initial wallets.
Right before the show started, we were talking about Magic, though, and you were saying that like they've been intentionally increasing complexity,
right?
You know, set after set,
right?
So how do you feel that aligns with that? Because the mass appeal of Magic is still pretty high, from what I gather.
I think that they are doing that to keep their existing base interested.
So they're not interested in new.
I don't think so.
They're just trying to keep it.
I don't think so.
Do you know how their numbers have been?
I mean, apparently that Magic was the only thing that kept them afloat last year. But
yeah, but you know, if it's not growing, it's dying, right?
But one of the reasons why it did that well is because they released a 10 million set. You know, 10 million different sets.
Sure.
Just to try to be like, hey, here's.
Do you feel like
here's as many products
the number
as you
of
can.
sets, the complexity is now a barrier to entry? If I haven't played since Ice Age, if I wanted to go join a Magic,
no. If you picked up a modern day set today, it would be it would be horrible.
Yeah,
it would be really horrible. In fact, for a long time, they don't do it. They did it, and then they stopped doing it, and now they started doing it, and now they stopped doing it again. They don't even do like a core set every year now.
Oh wow!
So it's like now the cards come out and they're very, 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 you know, pretty extreme. So you know, I do think that you know, I mean, they make like, you know, quote unquote starter decks, but they're still full of the cards that, you know, and also too, they're trying to get people into Commander now as their platform.
Is that an official format yet?
Oh yeah.
Is it? Okay.
Oh yeah. It's the number one. It's the number one.
It used to be like a house rule. I didn't know if
it's the number one format in Magic.
So like Magic, like WotC's like go play Commander.
Yes.
Huh.
Oh yes. I was in Vegas last year I wasn't there for it, but there was a Magic tournament, but some of my friends were in it. But while that tournament was going on, the Magic World Championships was occurring. Not a pro tour, the World Championships. Yeah. So they had an entire convention center, and like you know, a third of it was set aside for the Magic World stage, and they had their whole Magic the Gathering thing, stages, cameras.
Yeah,
you know. They had like a
big deal.
They had like a, you know, risers set up, you know, like a stadium seating. Crickets. On the other side of the convention hall, they had 5,000 people watching YouTube famous people play Commander.
Oh, geez. Cheering,
like going berserk to see their favorite YouTube celebrities playing Magic. Playing Commander.
Yeah.
It was pretty specific. So anyways, Commander is now definitely the biggest format. We also got a super chat from our friend JMH. JMH says $5 for Smith, $5 for Derik. Y'all aren't disagreeing enough, so I can't pick a side. I mean, we will make different points. I will say that. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Aaron and I mostly agree on most things, but we don't always agree on everything.
And even when we disagree, we usually don't care enough
to really fight it. Yeah.
Or it's like subjective, right?
Right. And then Tundalus says what's interesting is a lot of OSR creators, when talking about why they prefer the OSR, talk about what's missing from modern games that OSR has, not what they've been able to jettison.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
I do agree with that.
Well, and I think so. This is what something because by the way, for somebody who said, "Does this shot seem high?" It is. The camera got moved up, so very, very smart there. These shots are the same, but this shot is definitely is higher up. So that is correct. What was I saying?
Start talking about missing versus what they could jettison.
Correct. And so I think that there's been a misunderstanding when I say, okay, OSR games are high fun, low interest. And people go, oh, my OSR games are fun and interesting. They're great. I go, no. You're totally right. Your game is interesting. Mm-hmm. Your campaign is interesting. But that is something your GM is doing.
Right.
Not the system.
Right.
The system itself, not interesting.
Right.
Oh, but my GM added this thing and he did this thing and we're doing all this work. None of that is part of the rule system. That is all just made up.
Yeah.
Whether it's Mother May I or what we would call rulings over rules is not inherently a part of the system. So I guess what I'm saying is
it begs the question, is your GM doing that because they're having fun or do they feel they need to do it because of the system?
Yeah.
You understand where I'm going at that point. Yeah.
Right. And so to the point that Tundalus was saying is, they're talking about what's missing from modern games that the OSR has, not what they've been able to jettison. In terms of what's missing.
No, he's saying that the creators, they're making that statement. They're saying modern games are missing these elements.
They're missing, what's missing from modern games that the OSR has.
Right, but he's saying that's what the statement that these people were making.
Yes, so, and he's not talking about what they've been able to jettison.
Right.
He's talking about what's missing from modern games.
Right,
so,
and what I'm saying is I agree.
So what does the OSR have that modern games don't have?
No. I think what he's trying to say, and I apologize if I'm speaking for him, he's saying that a lot of these people who come out with things like, Shadow Dark or whatever are approaching the OSR as like, modern games suck because they miss these things. And I'm saying I do agree that a lot of these creators say that. I'm not agreeing that that's the correct statement.
Oh, okay, got it.
I'm agreeing that a lot of them do say that, and I do feel a lot of them do kind of miss the point, and including like things that we have jettisoned, like things that like, oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense anymore because it's not a war game anymore.
Correct.
In fact, I would go so far as to say, this is actually a problem with games like PF2 that didn't jettison enough.
Correct. Well, there's a lot of modern D20 games that still have the D20 DNA.
Right.
And it's like, well, it's not an old school game anymore. Right.
What are we doing?
What are we doing?
Yeah.
But I think it's weird because, I guess it comes down to what does that mean to be old school? And what does that mean to us?
Well, yeah, it's a great question because if you ask a lot of these people, and I'm going to pick on this book here, but really there's so many of them that have just come out in the past couple of years. Well,
Shadow Dark did $1 million, so it's a good.
It's a good one to use.
Yeah,
right?
It's a good one to use.
And this is a real-time torch system, but I don't really know too much about this other than that. So I apologize if I say anything wrong, but like this is just another classic D&D remake, which is fine. But there, a lot of these games focus on like the death spiral and the lethality of these games, which you and I have talked about at length. I think is a huge mistake and disservice to those games because I also don't think it's an accurate portrayal of how those games were meant to be played, right? Particularly when you focus in on the context of, this came from wargaming hobby and, you're taking a smaller band, but not like, a dude by himself,
right?
Into these dangerous locales, right? And like the game only reasonably makes sense when you are assuming that there's henchmen and hirelings, people going in with you, and that characters are dying left and right, but they're not typically the main characters because if that was the case, then these games would be virtually unplayable.
Right.
Like, yes, there is some amount of odds where 4 people might not die and level up, but that would be so infinitesimally small compared to the overall base that clearly the game wouldn't work.
Correct.
Right? So then it's either everyone cheated, which
it's possible.
It's possible. I don't think that was the vibe back in the day. Or, yeah, the idea was that these places are dangerous. You are going to bring hirelings in, right? And henchmen, and those are your red shirts, as we often refer to. They're the ones that's going to go try to set off the gas trap, not your main cast.
Well,
right?
and again, I mean, definitely something that I feel like that they have missed the point. I mean, this is even going back to Dungeon Crawl Classics, which is a game I have always bounced off of.
Oh yeah. The whole funnel.
The funnel.
Just what are we doing?
And I just find that to be like the least interesting part of the game.
Agreed.
You know, and here's the problem. Like, I hate the fact, I mean, it's weird, right? I hate the fact that my level 1 character has 3 hit points. And I get it. I understand, like, at a fundamental level, it's like, oh, but now you're afraid you're going to die and anything could kill you or whatever like that. And I get maybe that's even part of the DNA of what makes that an exciting experience, an emotional experience.
Yes.
But I also understand,
it's
like,
an interesting experience.
I made my character. I didn't want to have him just die in the first session, and you know what I mean? It's kind of a weird catch-22.
You would be okay if you made a decision that resulted in your death.
Yes.
But, you know, you're not okay with showing up and, hey, that's what I'm going to spend my Friday night on. And you're sitting there and the GM rolls some dice and goes, okay, you're dead.
Right. Well, and this is, you know, we talked about this, like, one of the things that I really did like about Forbidden Lands is I like the push your luck mechanic. Because fundamentally, to me, OSR games are oftentimes about pushing your luck.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you can't really push your luck in a modern game as much because it's just too balanced.
Right.
You know?
What does that even mean?
You know, if you try to take on a high CR monster or do something, you know, the numerical, the math will kill you.
Yeah.
But there's obviously a risk that is associated with that. And I think that is what makes the game, you know, very interesting and to a certain extent. Now, somebody here said, Dan said, OSR has an emphasis on the fictional realities being real to the point of usurping the rules, hence rulings, not rules, if that makes any sense. Simplicity allows for more simulation. So is that it? Is it that OSR games do simulation well? Because again, I've talked at length on this channel about how part of the reason I feel like I am GMing with handcuffs on when I play Pathfinder 2nd Edition is because there's rules.
You don't need to make any decisions.
There's balance. For you. There's rules. There's balance. Yeah. There's, you know, and I need to respect that because the whole game ecosystem works around that. So then you switch to a different game, right? Where, you know, the points are made up and the rules don't matter, right? And everything's whatever anyways, and the GM can just make up whatever ruling they want.
Yeah.
But is that experience, why is that experience simulationist and why is that experience better?
I understand what people are trying to say when they talk about that. I don't particularly feel it's simulationist. I don't particularly feel that a lot of D&D's DNA is actually simulationist. I've always kind of disagreed with that.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many weird abstractions of the game anyway. Like, I don't think I've ever really thought of it as like a model of reality. Like,
oh, I mean, hit points alone should.
12 years old. We're like, the fuck's armor class and hit points,
right?
You know, like it's just weird. You know,
yeah.
Why can I only smite once a day? You know, like there's just so many just random little weird things. You know. I get what people are trying to go for, right? When they say that stuff, but I also don't feel like, you know, the GM is going to be the arbiter of the physics engine either, right? Like saying that it's simulations because the GM is making all the rules is a super narrow viewpoint because your entire game fiction is based off of the experiences and knowledge of your game master.
Correct.
Yeah.
You have traded a rule book for a rule book, but the rule book is just whatever your GM is.
Right. Yeah. You don't know what you're necessarily getting, right? It's like, okay, you know, all right, was your GM a physics major? All right. Well, you know, we can assume that gravity and pulley systems are going to work really well, right?
Right.
You know, but when it gets to the fencing aspect, he's going to be like, I don't know.
Now, our good friend Alia says, is it simulationist in the sense that it cares more about the fiction than a more balanced game experience? So maybe this is it. Are OSR games, I don't know if they are or not, but are they fiction first gaming?
Right. And I like the frame of this question better, right? Because I'm getting into I'm being pedantic with
correct.
simulation, but I think it's important to talk about because we throw that term around here all the time.
Right.
I like the idea of, let's talk about this fiction first. Is OSR a fiction first game? I think so. I do. Because, you know, a lot of the rules you can almost say are like suggestions, right? And a lot of it's kind of up to like the GM, right? And a perfect example is the most basic mechanic, which is don't have the players roll if it makes sense.
Right.
right? Or if it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, because let's be very clear about something here. Okay, you and I, we're playing BXD&D.
Right.
Okay, and I don't know what the situation is. You know, whatever. You're infiltrating the bandits camp, and you dress up as a guy, okay, or whatever, and you know, and then Bob's distracting him.
Yeah.
And you're like, Derik, I stab him in the back. I'll be like, he's dead.
He's dead. Yeah.
You know, like
because what else we need to figure out here?
Because the fictions, you know, the fiction is in the forefront.
Right.
And Pepper says, what RPGs aren't fiction first? A lot.
A
Pepper.
A
lot. I would say D&D, by and large, you know, in the modern era, is not fiction first. And by and large, Pathfinder Second Edition is very much not fiction first. I mean, what this basically means is that those are mechanics first games.
Yes.
The fiction comes and follows from the mechanics of the game,
right,
not the other way around.
Right.
And of course, the problem with fiction first gaming is that you need something, because anything could happen in the fiction, right? And so you need a way of translating anything, the entire possibility space of events that could occur in your entire game. And you need a way to translate them into some sort of meaningful impact on the fiction, right? And there are some games like PBTA or Blades in the Dark, which do so through a very abstract rule set.
Right.
You know, and they basically push you into one of three buckets, you know.
Yeah.
Did you succeed? Did you fail? Did you, get
and there's an important thing there too, because
but OSR games, they just say,
right. Well, they're testing different things. And this is where I do think like where people talk about like simulation, right? And they get hung up on PBTA. You know, like taking a game, Third Edition is a great example of this, because Third Edition really did a lot to like streamline difficulty class, right? Your DCs. And they tried to map it into the fiction, right? Like we used to call Third Edition like a physics engine for role-playing games, because like it really didn't care about what feats you had or any of that. Like it didn't care necessarily like how dramatic something was supposed to be. It was just like, we roughly estimate that a wall that's wet would be this hard to climb with our math system. Right. And then if you have feats or powers or skills that let you get over it, that's great. You took those. But if not, it doesn't change the difficulty of this wall.
Right.
It's just hard to climb over. Right. And that's an important thing, because that wall is that like hard to climb, no matter how motivated you are, or you know, oh, my brother just got killed, or the princess needs to be saved. Like all the things that like in PBTA like might impact that. That doesn't matter, because the wall's wet, guys. It's just hard to climb.
Right, because
it's DC 25.
You know, this is something that somebody had. Fiction first gaming, it does not mean narrative first gaming. This is, a lot of people make this mistake. Fiction first gaming does not mean that the story takes precedence, or that the heroes have plot armor. That's not what fiction first means.
Right.
Fiction first simply means that our shared collaborative reality that we are playing and building in, the truth of that is more important than what anything says in the book. So, I mean, the best example, by the way, of mechanics first versus fiction first, and because people will, and that's fine, you can do this. They will motivate the mechanic through a explanation, which is fine. But I'll give you an example. In Pathfinder Second Edition, before the remaster, if you critically hit someone with a hammer, they are fall prone. And I think we can see how that would map to the fiction. But the fact is, the mechanic occurs. You rolled a crit. It's not really what you were doing. It's not like what was happening in the fiction. It's just that you crit and you had a weapon that had the hammer type.
And that's what happens.
And they fell prone. It could be a gnoll or an orc. It could be a gelatinous cube. It could be an 8-legged behir. It could be a huge giant.
I'm trying to think of.
And the fact of the matter is,
what's a creature that's immune to falling prone in Pathfinder?
I don't know if there is one. I mean, there might be one. But
there might be one, but there's not a lot.
Ooze, maybe, I don't know. Certain oozes. But the point is, now here's what people will say, and because they'll defend it. I'm not asking you to defend it, but they'll say, oh well, no, like you see, like when I crit the giant with my hammer, it was like I hit him in the knee, right, and he fell to the ground and got taken out.
That's fiction apologetics.
No, that's mechanics first. That's mechanics first, and then the fiction came from that.
I mean, sure, but I'm just saying, like that. Yes, you're right. It didn't happen first,
right? Whereas a fiction first gaming, it would be more like you would describe that your character is going for the giant's knee.
Right.
And then if you hit the guy with your hammer and you didn't say that,
right,
the GM would say, okay, he takes some damage, but he's not falling over. Why? Because that would knock him over. Right. The fiction doesn't support what you were trying to do.
Right.
And so the question is, which wins?
Right.
The mechanics or the fiction?
Well, I don't think it has to be a contest. I think that's why we have, literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, it's the same as that one over there. 5 different games here, and you got some over there. Like, I mean, great problem to have, right? Lots of different games.
Oh, sure.
I think, sometimes I want to play fiction first games, and every now and then maybe a mechanic first game.
Agreed.
Depends on
I don't think there's a benefit. I don't think there's a superior one at all. But what I'm saying is that are people so used to playing mechanics first games, they come to OSR. Now, here's the thing. Here's what I will say. I don't think OSR are actually fiction first games. I think they're mechanics first games. They just have fucking very few mechanics.
So I guess how would you describe what's left?
Right.
Because you're right. In combat in OSR games, that's not typically a place for the fiction.
Or randomly, like depending on what OSR game you're playing. Thieves use a thief skill system. Clerics have a turning table.
Sure.
You know what I mean? There are random elements. It's almost like a PBTA game where it goes, we don't care about anything except for what these 8 moves are.
Mm-hmm.
OSR games are kind of like that, where they go, yeah, we have rules for this. We have mechanics. We have no mechanics for anything else. And so it's not necessarily that it's fiction first. It's just that, well, there's no fucking mechanics otherwise.
So do you think the games are incomplete?
Well,
I mean, they've remade the same game like 30 times, and they're basically all the same rule set.
They really are.
So,
well, and that gets to an idea of like, well, what are they trying to copy there? Are they trying to copy the rule set? Because a lot of them do that.
What do they do?
Or are they trying to capture the idea?
Or their interpretation.
Or the feel.
Yeah.
And it actually has nothing to do with fiction first or mechanic first. It has nothing to do with having a skill system or not having a skill system or having GM Mother May I or not. Maybe it has to do with trying to, in a weird way, emulate that feeling of playing your first D&D game and being just amazed and scared and wondered at all different things.
No, I mean, I would say first, I do think like some people are just trying to make money. But
we don't know. Look, I don't know. Kelsey might be a very great person. I've never met her,
Listen, I try to make money every day.
That's true.
My job.
It's my job to make money. Yeah.
I'm not dogging on her. Kudos to her. She got $1 million Kickstarter. But I do think emulation actually is, particularly in the newer stuff, is a huge thing, right? And particularly like, we talked a lot about Forbidden Lands and the games that they're making.
Free League.
But I look at a game like FL, and this is clearly like a love letter, but not one that's like chained down by the past.
Correct.
Right.
Well, that's what the new SR is.
Right. But then the mechanics themselves, a lot of them are much more on the more emotional side, much more on the emulation side of things. Right.
Yeah.
Like, Forbidden Lands doesn't really care about like the number of rations you have. You have this abstraction,
right,
which emulates the feeling of being prepared and running low.
Yeah. And I'll give you an example, which is, something that we like to poke fun at. Shadow Dark, it does have other rules in it besides this, but the reason why they have
that was just the one that they were advertising.
The reason why they have the real-time torches
is
because, now here's the thing. And I mean this, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here or whatever, but like, if you put that mechanic into a table and it was me and it was you and it was some other people, it would have very little influence because we would understand that it's kind of mostly performative and it doesn't really matter. And that torches are copious enough. And the fact that it burns out, I think, once every hour in real time means that like, you're going to go through 3 or 4 of them in a session. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not such a huge deal. But I will say that for a lot of people, okay, just like when other people play Forbidden Lands, they are terrified to push.
I don't get that.
Because you take damage. And damage is bad. But the same thing is true with these torches. What will happen to the people playing these is that they will feel that pressure. Right?
So this is the same thing as the Pathfinder 2 moderate problem, right?
Sure. Yes.
Where you get a new player playing Pathfinder 2 who hasn't played these games.
Elia knows this. I literally made this exact comment the other day where I said, is this an issue of just being naive and not understanding?
People think moderates are dangerous because someone got dropped.
Right. They go, oh, we fought that moderate encounter. Right. Several of us were down to 10 or less hit points.
Right.
One person got dropped. They got brought back. It was so close.
Right.
I thought we were going to die.
The entire time there was less than a 1% chance that they died.
Correct. Right. And so, but what is emulation then? It's making people feel that way. It's not true in a sense. Otherwise it wouldn't be emulation. It would be simulation.
Well, I guess it depends what you're emulating, right? I mean, this is getting way off the tangent, but like we talked about how Dungeon World, for example, does a great job emulating Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure.
Better than Dungeons and Dragons does at emulating itself.
Yes. Dungeon World produces an experience that more people imagine or think or have nostalgia for D&D is like than an actual game of D&D. And I'll tell you why. It's because if you were playing one of those old school games of D&D, which again is completely to earth of mechanics, the GM was naturally as an amalgamation of director and psychotherapist and they were naturally creating these moments that were going to keep the game feral and alive. And all Dungeon World was trying to do is mechanize those, and turn that basically turn the GM's best practices that people were doing in those great games and turning them into things. And
a phenomenal example of this are things like time passing, which is a huge mechanic in old school games, right? And PBTA doesn't really have that because what they have instead are misses and partial hits, which is much more elegant at dealing with it, right? Because why does it matter that I got to roll 3d10 to see how many turns pass when I pick this lock? It doesn't. Unless during those, call it 15 minutes, the GM then also generates a random encounter. Now, all of a sudden, it matters, right? And Dungeon World was just like, why don't we just cut out all that crap and just go, oh, you missed? Okay, make a move as hard as you want, including a random encounter.
Correct.
Because
which is... And basically, it's taking the idea of the random encounter,
and
just giving you even more leeway, because the GM might want to do something else that's even more, appealing. And I'm not saying that GMs back in the day, quote unquote, fudged a lot, but I do think that because the game was so sparse and we didn't really have these concepts of balance the way we do or fairness the way we do today, I do think GMs, by and large, played a lot looser and more off the cuff.
Well, sure,
I know I did.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I'm thinking right now of specific random encounters. It's absolutely been if we were playing to 12 o'clock, it's 11:30, and I just rolled fucking 30 orcs. I'm like, fuck, I don't even want to run that tonight.
Right.
You see some sturges, they fly off.
Right. Well, and that's what I'm saying.
Let's wrap up the game.
The GM has always been in this role of being the conductor, of the train. Now, of course, this creates a huge problem, and maybe this is why the OSR has become more popular. Because there's a problem. The problem is, when you take those things away, when you take the guidelines and the rules and the fairness, what you're relying then on is the skill of the game master.
Correct.
And the game goes as the GM goes. If the GM is good, the game will be good. If the GM is bad, well, heaven help you. Yep. I mean, I can think of nothing.
That's bad for games and for business.
It's bad for games and for business, especially if you're trying to grow your thing.
It's a long time ago, but there was some data poll. I want to say it was on D&D Beyond. This was 5th edition, but it was 3 or 4 years ago. And it was absurd. It was 1% of the number of people who play D&D are dungeon masters.
Yeah, right.
You remember the study I was talking about?
Yeah. It was freakishly low. Well, I remember that when there was people were talking about the official D&D Discord or whatever, or not the official, but the unofficial D&D Discord, and the ratio of people who wanted to play versus people who wanted to DM was 40 or 50 to 1.
Right.
Which would be 2%, 3%.
Yeah. That ratio needs to be 6 to 1.
Yeah. So groups. and rightfully so. I mean, as I said before, there's a lot that goes in, that.
And also they factor in the whole Matt Mercer, why aren't you Critical Role?
Oh, sure.
Bullshit that was going on in that era. But it's a hard job. And, we've talked about this at length.
Well,
5th edition didn't do a lot to prepare you for it.
It's a hard job that has become less, in my opinion, rewarding. And I'll tell you why. Because number one, back in the day when I was a kid, and I was playing with, when Aaron was my player and I was sitting down to play D&D, Aaron had not played D&D with very many people.
No.
Okay. And so the only person that
I played it with one other person who also was your player.
Correct. You played with Justin. And so now I mean, you could go look at schmucks like us, but you could also go look at like literal professional studio actors. Yeah. And so you're comparing yourself, and your players are comparing yourself to it.
Hell, I could go hire a professional GM.
Secondly, you know, the players' expectations are not only higher,
right?
They're also more demanding, right? Because the player's going to, like, you know,
the expectations used to be, gee, I wonder if I'm going to live tonight.
Yes.
Right. And now it's like, this better be an entertaining story that we also complete.
Right. Did I express my character's arc while at the same time getting to use all the feats on my character sheet, while also at the same time feeling like I was in danger, but not so much that I felt like the game was unfair.
Right.
I wanted to be challenged, but not so challenged that I felt like, you know, we were making compromises to our character's decisions. Also, I want to make sure that we're having time for development of, you know, it's like, yeah, it's like the what you need to do. It's like,
yeah, well, crazy. And that's why, like, you know, PF2 is the perfect system for most modern gamers.
Right. It kind of just puts you on the rails and says, good luck.
Yeah.
And I mean, that works.
Good luck. You don't need good luck.
That's true.
Don't spend your last hero point.
Don't spend your last hero point.
And honestly, that's, you know, this is a tangent. You know what Remaster should have done? Remove attribute decisions, because that's the only place you can screw up your character.
Correct.
Probably just remove armor entirely and do something like 13th Age, because it does. The only choice you can make in armor can hurt you. Right? Like, oh, I'm a fighter. I'm going to wear leather armor. Right?
Right.
You know, and then the third one would be like, I don't know, make it so that you can't spend your last hero point so you can stabilize your die, right? Because no, seriously, those are the three things. That's the only one of these things is the only way you can really screw up playing Pathfinder 2.
Right.
You know? And so if they just fix that for your new players.
Yeah. I mean, Pumpkin says, I think in many modern games that have so much balance around PCs dying, they should just remove DC death instead.
100%. We've talked about this at length.
But you can't.
Because they want the feel of it.
Right. So here's the thing. If I remove death, and there are people, we've seen people in, you know, when we talk about Fabula Ultima, right? Yeah. Surrender versus sacrifice. Beautiful, brilliant, right? For that, especially for that kind of game. And a lot of people love it. And there's some people who have a very visceral reaction to that. Even in the Knights of the Last Call community, where they will say, oh, if I couldn't die in a game, right? That not of my choice, you know. Obviously, you can die in Fabula Ultima if you choose to.
Sure,
but like if
that, I mean, for the record, I think surrendering is way worse than dying.
Well, but so do a lot of us. But there's a lot of people who feel like if my character can't die, then the game is meaningless. And so I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, those people clearly don't have 3 kids and 2 jobs, because I mean, the paperwork alone is a deterrent for me.
Right, and here's the thing. So you have to put that in the game. But the people who make these games know that even though that's what those people want, they don't fucking want that.
Of course.
They know that if people are dying left and right, they're going to be on the message boards. They're going to be on Reddit. They're going to be bitching about how the game is totally terrible.
We're not going to sell them faster horses.
And they're not going to sell them. Right. So what do? They leave death in the game. And then they construct an entire system around it that completely removes the reality of that. Now, people have been playing these games for a while. They've been playing 5th edition. They've been playing Pathfinder 2. And maybe they used to be the naive person. Now they've figured it out. And so maybe that's why they want to play OSR, because they feel like they're playing without a safety net, because a lot of these games are more dangerous. They are more deadly.
I wonder how, you know, it'd be interesting to see like how many people do end up playing these games and then sticking with it after they get what they want.
That's a great question. You know, or how often, right? Because here's the thing: everyone's like, I'm finally playing a game where, you know, where I can die, and it's like a real chance that I could die. And then they're playing their game, and in the third session, they've just leveled up.
Right,
they're super excited.
Right.
They've got a potion of extra healing.
Boom. Dead.
And then the GM rolls a random encounter, and 5 trolls descend on them.
Yep.
And he just tears them to pieces. It's not even close. They try to run away, and the GM's like, they catch you, and they just like rip you to pieces. Right. And he's like, well, that's what, you know, I'm rolling my dice in front of the screen. They don't fail their morale check or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, yay. Okay. How many times does that happen?
Right.
Before you go, what the fuck are we doing here?
Right.
Is this just a funnel that just takes longer?
Right.
Because like we said before, a lot of these OSR games included it was a whole ecosystem that was interconnected. Things like hirelings weren't optional.
Right.
In a sense. Sure, they were optional, but like the way armor's optional.
Yeah. You don't have to wear armor, and you don't have to carry a sword.
You don't have to carry a sword. You don't have to wear armor, but you probably should. Right. Hirelings, retainers, the idea that this is very like Blaze in the Dark idea. It wasn't about your character.
Yeah.
Fuck your character. It was about your party. You know, my character's arc, that was not something that was in the DNA for these people, because you had no guarantee that they were going to live that long. I'm not going to create a character arc for my character if I'm playing in a session, any game basically, where death is even remotely a possibility. If I was playing in like your Fabulous Ultima campaign, you know, would I have an idea for my character and how I'd like to see my character go out? Absolutely, because I can basically guarantee that will happen. I will either, you know, live long enough or die and have my awesome complete moment.
And maybe that's the difference for a lot of people, right? Like, because these games are not narrative first. But like, even if you 5th edition and Pathfinder 2, people go into these games with, you know, their whole background and, you know, their arc of what they are trying to accomplish or whatever, right? You know, I wonder if that's part of the appeal, is that you don't have the luxury, you can't afford, you know, to make it about your character's arc because you're just trying not to die.
Right.
Your arc is, did I get enough money to repair my armor and replace our henchmen?
Correct. But at the same time, you know, how interesting is that over the long term?
Yeah,
we have found it to not be interesting enough.
Well, and that was like this guy here. So this is Venture Conquer King. Really good system. They do a great job of having an end game, which D&D's been fairly lacking of. So they take the whole domain management and they basically plop it at the end, and then just do a great job of codifying it. Also, this dude like got really into the economy. So like, if you ever want a balanced economy game, this is the game for you. But other than that, it's basically just Labyrinth Lord, which is just another OSR. And, you know, we've always been fascinated with domain play and strongholds and mass combat. There's a whole separate book for this, for just war, which is really cool. So we played this game after a couple years of him and Han about it. We had a great microscope world building session with this. You can check that out. We actually talked about that microscope game specifically for this campaign at length in one of the
in our microscope stream.
Yeah,
microscope stream.
And then so after we built this world, so I mean, like, right, we're setting up for success, right? We got a system we're super excited about. It's got an end game built into it, and we have a world that we're super excited about. You know, what can go wrong? Well, what went wrong is we just played the system and got bored.
Yeah,
because it was just basically, it's like why I don't like slot machines.
Sure,
right? Like, what am I doing? I'm just waiting for the right numbers to pop up.
Right.
Hope I don't get the wrong numbers.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, you know, when we think about rulings, not rules, the implication there is that what your preference is that the game almost in a way doesn't have rules.
Right.
In that you're just basically making calls. And you know what I mean? Like,
right.
it's kind of a strange.
At which point now it's just like.
But is that a game? That doesn't sound like a game.
Yeah.
That's not, we're starting to sound like we're getting
a conversation.
Kind of getting into a conversation or a collaborative storytelling thing where the GM has all the power, though.
Because 100%, right? Basically, what these games turn into is, you know, I got to give Derik enough compelling reasons,
absolutely,
to agree with me.
And I've said this before, right? The OSR games very quickly become about figuring out what your GM likes, and what your GM doesn't like, and if you can come up with, you know, convincing arguments that work well to the character, you know, to that GM, then you get what you want.
And circling back, that's why I wouldn't say that it's simulationist, right? Because the arguments that work on you would obviously not work on Bob.
Correct.
You know? Right. Because I would be applying logic, and then with Bob, I would need to change that.
If we were playing basic, right, and I was the game master, right, you would approach me in a certain way. And then if Bob stepped in to be the dungeon master, you would start talking about One Piece or some anime thing.
I would be hype, right? I'd be like, okay, I'm really strong, Bob. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run up the Medusa's sword and just hack her head off. And Bob like, no check needed.
Right. That's hype.
That's hype.
Right. And it would work.
Right. So I wouldn't do that with you because you would laugh at me and kill my character.
Correct. But it's also kind of it's very judgy in a way. You know, that's the other thing I think that people fail to think about OSR, you know, which is there's a harshness that can come with somebody going blah 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 GM this is my idea.
Well, I mean,
and the GM goes, that's a terrible idea, you die. You know what I mean?
They were called Judges Guild.
Yeah, right. But I'm just saying that like the pressure of the GM and the feeling of like being personally maybe not attacked, but personally sort of like, you know, Like you're bad. You're good, you know, like that can be very tough for a lot of people.
It's a very realistic thing that can happen in this.
I have found, again, going back to the fact that it's not really about simulation, it's about the GM. You know, and this is kind of the crux of what Powered by the Apocalypse is about. I found that a lot of GMs, I mean, they either say no and then they're labeled assholes, right? Or they basically just kind of always say yes.
Yeah.
If the player engages, you know, even a little bit, you know, I'm going to do this thing. And it's like, yes, that works.
Yeah.
Or, yes, that works. You know, because
I mean, if you have to choose, the yes one's probably a more fun game.
Absolutely. And because remember, your GM, you're constantly taking all that feedback from it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I hate to say this. This is where I was kind of going with this. When you play a game that's very heavily rules oriented, there's a lot of things that you won't ever do because you know what the rules say. And you know that you're basically asking the group and the GM to cheat, to give you what you want.
And most people won't do that.
And a lot of people won't do that, or their group won't do that, or they feel bad about doing that, or whatever. That's the agreement that we had upon. But OSR games, where there isn't a lot of rules, now I can kind of get away with anything I want.
And so this is the interesting part.
So in a way, it's kind of easier.
Exactly. I think there's a lot of fart smelling that goes on with the OSR crowd, where people will hype it up about how great it is and how, you know,
grim and gritty. And it's a real player skill.
Really, not rules.
It's not like the new games with these. You know, it's so easy.
Because let's assume you have a decent GM. And I would say in this case, if you had to pick between the guy that says no and the guy that says yes, the guy that says yes is going to have a more fun game in general. A guy that's always saying no in this, I don't even know how that game's working because this game doesn't work without some ruling. Right.
Well, the idea of playing this game and only raw
that doesn't work. Like there's no way in hell.
That is the worst case scenario of all time.
Exactly. Right. So I'm assuming we're not talking about that group. We're talking about the group that basically the GM's like, listen, if you paid attention to anything I said and interact with that, that's a fucking win. Right.
Right.
And I get that vibe. Trust me. I get that vibe.
I think any GM listening
gets that vibe.
Gets that vibe.
Right.
If just the fact that one of my players listened enough to my description that they were able to engage with even a small chunk of it,
you're going to reward that person with complete victory.
What gets rewarded gets repeated.
100%.
What are you going to tell that person? Oh, that's a terrible idea. No. All you're teaching them is don't interact with
don't interact with the game. It's about interaction, right?
Exactly.
So assuming you're that GM or you have that GM, then you know what? OSR is going to be great because your amazing idea, which probably fucking sucks, is going to work.
Right.
Because guess what? Dumbass, you're playing a game.
Right. It isn't real simulation.
But you know, we're talking about emulation here. It's not about emulating the game. For some people, it's emulating having power. Like they feel like they are a strategic genius.
Oh, sure.
Right? Like I won that battle, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know,
my cunning overthrew that warlord.
Right.
Right?
No. This is very true because when we talked about Blaze in the Dark, I made this, I had this argument where I basically said, well, Blaze in the Dark skips the planning of the heist, right? And it just says we go, you know, we make.
And some people get pissed by that.
And I said a lot of people don't like that. And I said, well, but there's two things here. Number one, it does take a long time. And it's not necessarily the most exciting thing to do in the world. And I go, but here's the real reason why that's stupid. Because you, the player, guess what? Your idea fucking sucks. You're not a criminal mastermind.
Right.
You're not a genius. You work in insurance.
Right.
You know, like what the hell do you know about thievery? Nothing. Also, you're making a master plan against a security system made by someone who also is not an expert. I'm the game master. Right. I don't fucking know what I'm talking about. You're like, oh, I read online, I gotta go into the vents and I gotta make sure that this is secure. And I'm like, dude, I didn't even remotely think of that.
Yeah.
Like I put
you based out the plot of
Ocean's 11. But I made it fantasy Ocean's 11. There's a watchdog and two guardsmen. You know, like I didn't think about this stuff. And so
instead of the Asian guy, we have a halfling.
Right. And so it's like you're doing this. You feel like, and so when people go, they're robbing me of my opportunity to show everyone how brilliant I am. And I go, no, we're not. You're not being brilliant anyway.
Those people, I do think, end up here at some point.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They end up going to OSR. Yeah.
Yeah. Because
there's this idea that like, I'm smarter, I'm better, and these rules are just holding me back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'll be honest with you, like, because remember, complexity, you know, it can make a game more interesting, but it can also make the game more difficult to run.
Yeah.
And I run into that sometimes when I'm running a game that has a lot of rules. Because as the GM, I'm in this moment. I don't want it to be this way.
Right.
I want it to be my way. Or I think, hell, I think I'm so smart and good and I know exactly what's going on that I want it to be the way that I would do it because I feel like that's more appropriate. And so, there are times when I play a game, which isn't even technically OSR, but like when I played 5th edition, I didn't even fucking know the rules. To me, you know what 5th edition D&D was? It was BX D&D, basically, with a bonus instead, like a skill set.
It's basic. The way we played it, particularly if we don't use feats, it's basically basic with bloated hit points.
Correct. It was, but my point is, I mean, I was making obscure. I wouldn't even call them house rules because house rules implies that
they were rulings.
But they were like
they were rulings that probably at some point had rules.
Yes, but
and
also,
you were just overruling the rules.
But also, like sometimes I will make rulings that aren't. It's not like the player did something. Like I'll give you an example. When we were playing Forbidden Lands, okay, this last Friday, okay, a Death Knight arose in the sarcophagus tomb.
Sorry, you gotta be specific. Which Death Knight?
Oh, the second Death Knight.
The second Death Knight.
Okay, the second Death Knight.
Second TPK.
And the Death Knight, crackled with necromantic energy. And Aaron here held back one of his actions because he knew he had a dispel or drain magic ability. And sure enough, the Death Knight called upon his necromantic powers and called to the spirits of the dead and brought them forth in what was a pretty powerful spell. Mm-hmm. You rolled like a champ. And you got so many successes that you were able to completely, basically drain the spell away with a dispel, sort of like a reactive dispel. That was your action. Now, you asked for nothing other. I mean, that was purely by the rules. Mm-hmm. On your next turn, when you went to cast a spell, I believe it was a bear swipe.
It was.
I go, you've drained the power. You've kept on to some of it. Make this more powerful.
Right. Free willpower.
Give you free willpower. Yeah. Make your spell more powerful. You didn't ask me for that.
Right.
That wasn't
fit the fiction. It was cool, and you made a ruling.
That was a fiction first decision.
Yeah.
In my mind, in the world, in the fiction, the way we had described it, you had drained that magical energy through yourself, like you were a lightning rod, and you were dispersing it back into the earth. But some of that,
into a bear claw,
it's like in the first Avengers movie, right, where when Thor hits Iron Man with his lightning blast and is like, it overcharges his reactor, right? And it's just very clearly that it's fictional. And so, you just, boom, you reacted that way and go, yeah, and I'm going to give you a bonus. But you didn't ask for that.
No, that was you just totally interpreting it.
So it's not really a ruling.
No, I don't think the player has to drive it to make it a ruling.
Correct. But what I'm saying, though, is
you clearly made a mechanical ruling based off the fiction.
Correct.
The fiction just wasn't like exclusive to me.
Right. Correct.
You were like, listen, I know no one asked for it, but I'm coming in here and injecting that this needs to happen.
Right.
Because part of my responsibility as the game master is to keep this world alive.
Correct.
And that's not only at the whims of the players.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
If anything, I think that's actually a more appropriate way to do it. Right.
Yeah.
Because, as a game master, while yes, you're supposed to be fans of the PCs, you're also supposed to keep their lives interesting. There is a degree of impartiality with that. Right.
Right.
And you're ruling on the fiction regardless of who asked for it. Right.
Yes. And I think, Josh says, and I think this is a good point, sure, but the OSR way is to have conversations anyways, because everyone understands that's an important and interesting part of RPGs. And I actually agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually do agree with that a lot.
Yeah.
Which is, I think,
everyone on the same footing and page.
That's why, as Jesse is pointing out here and Pumpkin is pointing out, position and effect from Blaze in the Dark, I think is a fantastic system. Mm-hmm. If for no other reason, then it helps us formalize the fiction. So we're all understanding, again, in a very basic terms, is this a desperate position?
Right.
Or is this a risky one? Or are we in control here? Like, help me understand what's at risk.
And that,
because, when it's anything,
yeah,
you're like, what am I risking here?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and the same kind of token, right? This is also why I don't like gotchas.
Correct.
Gotchas are they're not good or fun or interesting because it's oftentimes a misconception of the fiction, which is bad, right? Like you always want everyone in the group, GM and players, to be on the same page fictionally, because if they're not, then the GM needs to get everyone back on that page.
Sure.
Right? Because a gotcha typically is because someone didn't understand what you were saying, right? Or because the GM was like, "Oh, you said you're gonna jump down. Okay, you jumped down. Like
it's a 50-foot pit. You die.
You're not. Like what are we doing here? That's not good, right? Like no one would reasonably do that, right? Because what you really want are people to understand what is happening, understand the stakes, and then make a decision.
That's the
agency.
essence of agency.
Yes.
Exactly. Right. You want people to feel empowered to do so, and then make that decision. I mean, I talk about how I like push your luck mechanics. That is baked into the Blades in the Dark resolution mechanic because you can always trade position for effect.
That's right.
Now, it works both ways. You could reduce your risk, but then you don't get as much.
Right.
Or you can increase your risk and you get more.
Yeah.
And so that is a personal choice that you get to make on that moment. And it could be a role-playing decision. It could be a game mechanic, almost board gamey decision. Like, this is a good time to make this decision. And so I think that has a lot of element to it. So one thing, we talk about the OSR, and in particular, I've mentioned it earlier, and I mentioned Dragonbane and how this has kind of been sweeping the Knights of Last Call Patreon. I think we have like 7 or 8 different community games of Dragonbane going, including a full launch of what is called the East Marches, but it is a West Marches style game in the formalized sense. Where
one day we're gonna have a campaign, the glorious central of the empire.
Yes, right. We've had the northern reaches, we have the East Marches.
What's happening in the middle?
What's happening in the middle?
Why are all these adventures going out?
Nothing's going on in the middle. That's why everybody has to leave. And I have asked my patrons many times. I go, what is with this game?
Right.
I've read it. I played it.
Yeah. You liked it.
It's fine.
Yeah.
And again, this is a game that has been around since the 1980s. Free League got a hold of it, and they changed it up a little bit.
This is basically second edition.
They free leagued it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But by and large, it is an extremely simplistic game. But I wonder if what they did with Dragonbane, and this is the things that jump out to me. Number one, which is very unique, I think, personally, for an OSR, new SR style game. Okay. Number one, it has these conditions, these emotional elements, right? Where you can say, as a consequence of a failed check or because of the other, you're angry, you're weakened, or whatever you describe. And it is a sort of mechanical narrative currency where you can push your roll, like get a second bite at the apple, get a re-roll, but you have to take one of these conditions and explain it in the fiction.
Yeah, the game tells you have to
very
explain
explicitly.
It in the fiction.
It's motivated in the fiction. So now that is about as drip, drip, drip of narrative mechanics as you could have. I mean, it's very minimal.
Yeah.
It's very minimal. It doesn't ask a whole lot. And by the way, what do these...
I mean, it's a point above flaws and bonds from 5e.
I do think it, but I think it is in a notable way, and I'll tell you why. Because
I'm saying it is better.
Okay, no, but I'm saying, but I think it's more than you think, because ultimately flaws and bonds are kind of in the GM's decision. It's the GM's decision to give you that inspiration. Right. In this game...
Yeah, did you meet your flog well enough for me to give you inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, yes. And, the game, but in this game, you're the player. You get to decide. Yeah. I'm going to be angry and I'm going to get this push.
Yeah. And the GM can be like, it's a dumb reason to be angry. Like, for the most part, the player put in any effort at all. It's done and done.
Yes, exactly. And the game even says that directly. Okay. So the second thing, which I think is interesting, is this game very specifically has built into it a very basic system. It does have a skill system, which is a little unusual for OSR games, but that's all it has. There is no there's no base attack.
Right.
There's no
THAC0 skill
system. It's just basically it's taking THAC0 and applying it to other skills.
Yeah.
And you have every skill and you just roll under. There's no DCs or anything like that. And again, people are like, this is revolutionary. This is just roll under. This is literally AD&D second edition. Okay. But
not only is it that, but it's also like again, you're I understand this game has advantage and disadvantage in it too, but the default mechanic resolution there is based off of your character's individual skill versus the actual difficulty, right? Which is something that is different in most OSR games, right?
Right.
Most OSR or fiction first is this is just how hard it is.
Yes.
This game is, how good are you at something?
Well, I mean, this game is basically, it seems crazy to say this, but basic D&D, AD&D second edition had the idea of the ability check,
Right.
which was roll a d20,
Which had the same problem.
modifier.
This is why the DC system was created.
Roll equal to or under.
Right.
And of course, that did lead to certain problems.
Right.
But
okay, open this iron door. Is this harder or easier than the wooden door? It's the same.
It's the same. What does that sound like? Sounds like Powered by the Apocalypse.
100%.
And Powered by the Apocalypse says, well, either if it's not interesting, we won't roll.
Right.
And if it's so impossible, we won't roll.
Right.
We're only going to roll
if it's interesting. And possible.
And possible. And that's what this game does.
Right.
This game is Powered by the Apocalypse.
Well, a lot of people who play this game don't like PBTA because of that very mechanic.
I know. But the fact of the matter is that mechanic is really good. They just have this bias against it.
Yeah.
You know, and again, and I will say this. I mean, again, we played second edition for a long time. I've told a lot of people in my life, hey, make a strength check. Hey, make a dexterity check. Right. We didn't have the tech of advantage and disadvantage.
Right.
So boons and banes is what they call them in this game.
Right.
And that does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Hey, and that.
It's an iron door disadvantage.
It's a big iron door disadvantage. And I mean,
which works for me. Like it's one of the things I thought was very elegant in 5e.
Yeah, I love that.
How fast is like, good idea, advantage.
And this game they stacks too.
Yeah.
So like you can even you can even get a ton of that. But the other thing is, and again, the system is entirely seamless and integrated. Combat, skills, exploration, done. It all uses this exact same skill system. So you have this very light narrative system. You have a very simple, very brief. I think a lot of people look at a character sheet that only has strength, dex, int, wiz, charisma, and they go, what can I do?
Right.
How do I show you that I'm good at this thing and bad at this thing? In the fiction, we may know that my character is better at bushcraft than your character. But how do we reflect that?
Right.
How is that shown on our character? Because that seems like something that would happen. You know a lot. You know, well, you have a high int score. Okay. Well, all right. What do you know a lot about everything? Well, I'm very dexterous. Okay, so are you good with everything dexterous? And it's like you lose some of that individualism.
Which is why we got even started with I want to say second edition, but I think it was actually Unearthed Arcana. You started getting non-weapon proficiencies.
Right, and non-weapon proficiencies.
Which really did nothing.
Well, no, non-weapon proficiencies in second edition were literally still based off of ability checks. It would be your strength.
No, it was just more of saying, oh, you're fletching? Okay, you are a Fletcher.
Right, and it gave you a bonus, essentially, which is kind of what it does here.
Yeah.
Because it's based off your attribute, and then it goes up if you're better at it, so you have a better chance. But the third thing that this game does that I wonder, it makes a difference, and this is very unique. The game explicitly has in it, I mean, it's a very basic system. When you get the end of the session, you might increase some of your skills by 1 point.
Right.
But the game has explicitly in there diegetic progression.
Right. And these are the heroic abilities.
These are the heroic abilities, which are kind of like powers or feats or whatever you want to call them.
No, the rule you're citing here is the same rule that actually is like, for example, PF2, alternative rewards, where you could hand out a feat or a god boon or whatever like that. And this one you can hand out heroic abilities.
The distinction is, now you can get it in the game mechanically, but it's like a capstone ability, right? It's for when you max out a skill, which is really hard to do.
Which is hard to do.
So you're basically...
Because you basically start with an HA and something.
You start with an HA because you start with a heroic ability because of your class and because of your race.
And if you don't get any for rewards, it's going to be a very long time before you get your next one.
Correct. I mean, unless you roll super hot, know, and roll really well. But the point is, you don't get, for the most part, you don't get feats every other odd level.
Right.
You don't get the new class feature.
All you get,
at level 3 and level 6
upgrades?
or 7. Yeah, I mean, there's no level.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a game that doesn't have any sort of real progression to it, but it does set this baseline of. But here are things that you should give out if the moment calls for it, and it's it even says probably never more than like once per adventure, not session, like per adventure. This should be a big deal. But I think that's very unique because one of the things that we've always talked about with like these OSR games is we get bored with them, and there's nothing about the game that says, because there's no balance, and clearly the game does not suggest you should be handing out heroic abilities. No. But I can tell you, we've played a lot of not even OSR games. You've played a lot of 3rd edition with me, and you played a lot of 4th edition with me, and we've played a lot of 5th edition. I've played a lot of 5th edition with you as my game master. And in Dragonbane turns, heroic abilities are raining from the sky when we play these games. And it has always been something that is very, very powerful for us and very meaningful for us. And in fact, in a way that I think it's way cooler to get one of those than it is to level up and take a feat.
Sure.
In fact, oftentimes I'll get to the point where I become disappointed at the feats in the book. And I even started asking myself,
they're,
like,
they're not like, super totem powers.
Yeah, they're not superpower. Or I just feel like I don't like when I look at this on my character sheet, I get excited because like I remember where that came from and what that session was and why I got that. It feels very meaningful to me. I took this because I leveled up.
Yeah,
feels less special.
Yeah, a lot of people always make this a mutual exclusive thing, right? You can have one or the other. I actually like both, and this is part of my issue.
Right, and that is a disagreement of us.
Right. Because you like diegetic, but like I actually like both.
You like both.
Well, because everything is it's context. Sometimes I just want to mechanically be good at something, and it's not a big deal. I just want to go. I'm good at longbows.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not amazing. I'm just proficient, and I want to be better at that. Or I want to have a more efficient heal. Right? Like one of the things I think we disagree on is, you're not a big fan of 4E feats, and I actually like 4E feats.
Correct.
Right. I like 4E feats because they're so stupidly simple, because that's all I really want from that. Right. I want to go, okay, cool. Yeah. I get a bonus to this now. Good. Done. Baked in. I never have to look at it again. Right. I like that because I like being able to have some progression that I don't have to ask permission for.
Right.
Okay. Now, do I like that exclusively? No.
Right.
No, because then I'm like, well, did I even play this game? Like, what's the difference between my character and someone else's character?
Correct.
Right.
And
so
that I've dealt with that where I've broken down because I'm like, that I can just remake my character exactly.
Oh yeah, Pathfinder 2 was like ridiculous for that because nothing was random. You literally could just rebuild the same character. And what was worse at Pathfinder 2 is, you were very much discouraged from, like dropping in diegetic rewards because it would throw off the whole game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Mark's having a stroke somewhere because someone got an extra feat.
But like if you give somebody a reward, but it was because it was on the treasure table. And now you're like reducing how much gold they get because
what is that?
Because they got this reward. It's like, what is that? That's not a reward.
Which is part of the reason why everyone had too much loot.
Correct.
Because it felt lame.
It does.
It felt like a punishment.
It feels
you got this cool sword, so I'm going to screw you over.
And I'll be completely honest for the people at home. One of the hallmarks of a lot of our campaigns is we'll play them, 3rd edition, 5th edition, and people level up and they get their class features and they get their feats, right? But then they also get our special abilities and they also get really powerful magical items that don't exist in the game. Yeah. And then by the time we're at the end of the game, we're fighting God in space.
Of course. That's why we was to fight God in space. Everything else was a chump.
Right. But that fails though when it, that's maybe part of the core D&D experience, right? I guess is that 0 to literal, not even superhero, but like ultra hero kind of experience. But I know that there's always this weird moment where you and I will be looking at each other like, what does our campaign become?
Yeah, where are we at now, right?
What are we even doing here?
And this is why, we're probably, compared to most groups, I don't know if lucky is the right word, but I'd be willing to wager we've probably had a lot more 10 plus campaigns than your average group. But look at our 10 plus games. Like we don't look as level 10 as halfway through the game. We look at level 10 as about 75-80% through the game.
Sure.
And those last 10 levels, they go fast.
Right. We definitely always get to there's a very slow power curve in our games, and then it reaches a certain point, and then it rockets to the moon.
Right. Because we're like, okay, we're gonna wrap this up now. We're gonna have fun, but we're gonna wrap this up because it's getting ridiculous.
I think what actually happens is we reach an inflection point where the game is no longer interesting.
Yes.
We have gained enough powers, we've gained enough magical items, whether they were legitimate or bullshit.
Right.
We have enough super power special abilities or whatever we're having. And everybody kind of understands fundamentally, okay, we've turned a corner. The game is no longer that interesting. And
so now it's about wrapping up things that we care about in fiction.
Let's just wrap this up. Yeah. And I've always said too that like for me, the highest levels of D&D have always been sort of like more like a victory lap.
Oh yeah.
Like I never sit there and go, well,
level 20 is not about challenge.
I said I completely do not care about the challenge at high level D&D. In fact, I want you to feel like you are incredibly powerful, and that all of these monsters, because if you spend all this time and power and level become this, and then you're somehow still being challenged at every turn and corner, what kind of world is that?
It's like, one of the first shows I did with you guys, we were reviewing that monster book for Lost
Monsters of Myth.
And I don't think people understood why I had such a problem with the one that was not even a monster, it was a bunch of hazards. right? They're like, they didn't understand. And I was like, this is so neutering. You're level 20. Like, no, you're done. Like nothing compares to your level.
You beat the game.
You beat the game.
Yeah, you beat the game.
Like, okay, yes, like the final fight, maybe you're going up against a level 26 god or something. You're still gonna win. You know?
Yeah.
Like we went up against Metarak, right?
Yeah.
You know, and you obviously rewrote the entire encounter. Metarak was normally like a level CR 24 Red Dragon.
This was a third Pathfinder, actually. It was a Pathfinder 1 dragon.
Trailblazer.
Trailblazer.
Pathblazer.
Path Derik Blazer.
3 hex deep.
I think it had 9,000 hit points.
Yeah, which is not what a CR 24 Red Dragon normally has.
No.
Right?
No.
Yeah, 9,000 hit points.
It was also mythic rank 10.
It was mythic, you know, and you know, and it was a great fight. But like, you know, we went in there going like, yeah, we're gonna win this. Like, we didn't disrespect the creature, but like, you're level 20 with mythic rank 10 in some cases. Like, guys, you're broken. You're nuts.
Right.
Like, you have custom magic items and loot. And
do you think
our cleric was a staff who got reincarnated as like a unicorn? You know.
Now it's interesting because Josh here says the lack of the crazy power curve stuff is a big part of the OSR appeal for me. Now it's interesting is on the surface he's right. Right, in the sense that OSR, you think OSR. You think no superheroes here. None of your bullshit feats here. These are torches. And if it runs out, it's like Shadowgate. You're fucking dead, you know? And then the random encounter, the trolls are going to kill you. But, like, how long is that fun for?
Yeah, I mean, well,
like,
so there's two pieces there. Context, because I get what he's saying, and I understand the appeal. And there's a degree of truth to that. And we can get into it later, but you know, we came from that more like video game background, you know, back in the day versus like wargaming, right?
Right. I did not grow up playing war games. I grew up playing Legend of Zelda and Final Fantasy.
So we have a different perspective than I think like your traditional people. But also to your point, yeah, no, I think you're right. Like because here's the thing: a lot of these spells that are busted were just as busted as they were in first edition.
Sure.
You know, if not more so. Actually, a fireball was devastating. Right. Yeah, I would say like the first few levels are like that. To be honest, the first few levels in 5e are more or less like that. People don't want to say it, but I mean, we had more deaths in 5e than we did in Pathfinder.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, at a certain point, the bloat catches up, and so then no one can ever die again. But you know, early on, before level 4, yeah, you can kill people left and right. It's not even a big deal.
Well, and that's what's just so weird about it, though. It's like, you know, going back to this OSR concept. So it's like, if there's nothing super special about the rules and the concepts and ideas of the game aren't, I mean, you could use them in any game. You know, you could use them in any game system. So what is it that is causing such an appeal? Why when you read that Hackmaster book, do you get excited?
Well, there's lots of reasons about that. So I do want to talk about that because I think it's important, and it also brings to forefront a potential weakness, which is nostalgia, which we talked about before.
Right.
And the nostalgia is thick and heavy in this. I want to be clear up front. But one thing I do think is a significant difference between how games like this were made and games like Pathfinder 2 were made isn't so much the rules exactly as it is the mechanics that support emergent gameplay. And that has been a big shift. The older games were built around random tables, exploration, things like that, right? And we were laughing before today's stream.
Oh, sure.
A book that I didn't need to order because I found it the moment this came today on my shelf.
This is the Hacklopedia.
The bestiary for Hackmaster. We were chuckling because, you know, if you've ever seen, you guys can see the camera, but if you ever seen, you know, old school bestiaries, you have things like activity cycle, what time of day they were active, right? Number appearing, percentage chance and lair, frequency, alignment, vision type, habitat, diet, organization, climate, terrain. Very useful things if you're world building. You don't see these in modern bestiaries at all now.
Correct.
In fact, it's super annoying. It's actually really hard to figure out what terrain a monster is supposed to be in.
Right. Well, that's because it's not really the question.
It's not the question anymore.
The question is this a CR balanced appropriate monster?
Exactly.
And does it fit my story?
Right. Whereas this is like, well, doesn't the number of pairing change the balance entirely? If it's between 3 and 30, isn't that like a lot of dudes? Yeah, it could be. Right.
Could be, or it could be 3.
You know, things like that and percentage chance and lair are two things we've talked about a lot in the past. where this is what you call emergent gameplay or adventure generators. Because the idea was, if you roll 30 orcs, you don't just like attack your party and surround, your 4 players with 30 orcs. That's a war band. All right. That is a significant event. This band of orcs is moving through the area. What are they doing? What are their goals? Where do they come from?
Sure.
Right. The players can investigate this and figure this out, right? Oh, crap, these new orcs moved in. We got to deal with this. If we don't deal with it, well, that's 30 orcs. That's a lot of orcs. They're going to mess up that village, right? Same thing with Chance and Lair. You discover a lair, a random encounter just generated a whole new dungeon.
Right.
That could be sessions of gameplay based off tables. And this is my point. The older editions of the game were filled with things like that. Today we talk about low prep, no prep, all that stuff. I would say that was a concept baked into the game initially, because like you might be wandering around exploring and you find a new dungeon and 3 orc tribes and who else knows what else is going on.
I would even.
And by the way, one of the orc tribes might be friendly because you rolled well in the reaction and they actually join your forces.
It's very
it's crazy.
It's actually funny that you say that, because the evolution of the obviously there was BECME, but before BECME you had BX, and you had this basic book, right? This is called Menser Basic, and then you had Moldve Basic, and then you had Cook Expert BX. That's why it's called BX. And what's interesting about it is the basic game, which is fundamentally characters levels 1 through 4, 1 through 3.
Yep.
It really basically says be in the dungeon.
Right. You will die to wilderness.
And I think that's because it's not just for the players, it's for the GM. Because a dungeon, we've talked on this channel before, a dungeon is great because you can let your players go anywhere. The idea that you would have a railroad in these olden days was something that's crazy, because there was no idea of like this should be a story.
Right.
That was not a thing. But hey, you made these 10 rooms and you have these 10 things and you're good. You don't have to think about everything. You don't have to come up with this emergent gameplay.
Right.
But when you went to
It's
expert,
a controlled sandbox.
when you went to expert, suddenly
you're
doing overland wilderness encounters, and you suddenly start having these random encounters with 3d10 orcs,
right?
And maybe there's an orc band, and maybe they are moving in. Maybe they represent a new push from an orc chieftain who's moving into the area.
That's a higher level of skill for the GM to resolve correctly.
It's harder for the players,
right?
But it's also harder for the GM.
Yeah.
And so there's this idea of like sort of leveling up your GM, but it also means
that's a huge thing.
It also means that the challenges as a player, not your PC, well, both your player and your PC. It means that the challenges that your player and your PC had to deal with at the levels 1, 2, and 3, are now different.
That's what I was going to say.
At levels 3, 4, 5,
there was
6.
a progression in the game, and a progression in that you changed what you were doing, and that's another thing that we've lost.
And that, to me, going back to the title of this thing, for me, that I think is the single greatest reason that I am drawn to these games.
It's not the same game for 20 levels.
It's not
for
the
3
same.
years.
I don't want the same game for 20 levels and for 3 years. I mean, I
guess
look,
there's people out there.
I mean, look, I love PF2. I mean, even 4th edition.
Sure.
Is, hey, you get powers and abilities, you fight the monsters, and yes, I get it. The tone changes. The genre.
There's a flavor change, but mechanically, it's the same game.
Mechanically, it is the same game. But this is very different kind of play. You know,
a wilderness expedition was completely unlike your first foray into a dungeon.
It was so different. And it was, completely different things that you had to concern yourself with, and
then obviously, when you moved on to BECME or
So BX ended, but BECME went basic, expert, companion, master, immortal.
Yeah,
if you wanted to go all the way to the top.
Yeah, and each one of those not only introduced like different mechanics, they introduced a different way of playing the game. The game experience was different.
Right.
Like when you're a literal god worried about the number of followers you have and your divine interests across the planes, that has nothing to do with going into a dungeon.
Correct. If you're an immortal, who's dealing with expanding your portfolio and fighting for the power of law as a demonic incursion occurs in the prime material.
You're not going to level up in a cave.
What fucking dungeon are you going into? Like, it doesn't matter. And in fact, we've talked about this before. We were talking about this before we went on air, that a lot of the spells and abilities that you get in D&D serve to trivialize earlier challenges.
Right.
And it's because it's almost like fast travel in a video game. Hey, do you remember when you were low level and you were always running out of food and light? And then you started exploring the overland, and it was like a real pain in the ass to make sure that you were alive, that you had enough supplies, that you didn't run out of food or water. Yeah, we remember that too. And remember how it was like really fun to try to hunt and figure out how to deal with this wilderness challenge? Yeah. okay, we did that. We don't need to keep doing that forever.
We've solved that problem.
You've solved that problem.
Yeah.
I cast create food and water. Now, we don't give it to you.
If you're an immortal being dealing with a demonic incursion, we don't really want you tracking rations.
Correct. And if you go back to, the early games, create water was not a cantrip that you could cast infinite times per day.
Yeah.
In fact, I
I
think
it was first level.
I think it was
Maybe
first, or
second.
it might have been second level.
It was a big deal, and it made sense. Of course, that would be a higher level spell,
Right, because if that was a real concern for the game. I'm looking now here at the spells. Let's see here. Second level magic and elf spells. No. This would be a cleric spell.
Create water is such a great example too of kind of like the in Forbidden Landscape.
Well, it's not a first level spell.
Yeah, so
it's definitely
higher doesn't exist. I think it was actually higher.
No, you know what? First level cleric spell was purify food and water.
Okay. So you still have to find it.
So you still had to find it. You still had to have it.
Right.
All right. But my point is, at a certain point in the game, and so same thing with like the dungeon. And it's like, this is how these problems emerge. D&D has always had the teleport spell, right? Basically, since the beginning of the game. And then what happened in the 90s and the 2000s and all these others, they still had teleport. And then you'd have all these forum posts and Dragon.
How do I deal with
teleport? My adventures keep teleporting to the end of the town. Yes, of course they do.
That's what they were.
Because you're not supposed to walk through the fucking hallways anymore. You're just supposed to teleport to the bad guy and start kicking his ass.
Right.
Because we don't deal with the dungeons anymore. We did that.
Which
we've moved beyond that.
We are huge fans of the Frog God game guys, right? Necromancer games back in the day, right? And Rapana Thug, we talk about all the time. Rapana Thug is a mega dungeon, but inherently, like this dungeon is flawed, right? And you could tell because some of the things they have to do is like the lower levels, of course, are warded against teleportation,
right?
Because if you don't, what are you doing?
Right,
you can't play it,
right?
So what do we have to do? We have to start rolling things back,
right? And again, and it's like it's in D&D. Now, to be fair, D&D is built in with this progression system, but we've also said before the game understood that because once you got to a certain level, the power that you gained each level was fairly minimal,
right? Ironically, around 10th level,
right,
everyone slowed down dramatically.
In fact, I've even argued that going back to first edition D&D, basic too, but saving throws. Remember, just like ability checks, there was no DCs.
Yeah,
a saving throw versus poison.
Yeah,
didn't matter if it was the epic poison of the gods,
right,
or if it was a giant scorpion.
You just had a personal resistance to poison.
Okay? Didn't matter what it was. And by the time you got to high level teens, if you're a fighter, your save versus poisons might be a 2 or higher,
right,
or a 3 or higher. You are 90% likely to make your save, which essentially is plot armor.
Right.
And the point is like, well, of course that isn't a challenge anymore.
And by the way, that's not simulationist.
Oh, no, not a simulationist at all.
Right.
But why was that put in the game? It's like, well, yeah, because at that point, the challenge isn't, am I going to live or not?
Right.
Am I going to be able to beat these monsters?
Right.
The challenge was different. Can my country take over this country? Can we secure an alliance with the elves before the orcs invade? That's more. Well, why don't I just personally go kill all the orcs? Because you can't.
You can't.
Because you're not a superhero.
Right.
Because they're just going to kill you.
Right. Except for a high level wizard, which could do that. In which case, okay.
In which case, okay. And in that case, you got to deal with that. But even the wizard did have some limitations. They didn't have quite the number of spell slots that they had back in the day, and there were certain problems.
Well, as we talked about before the session too, a lot of those higher level spells beyond 6th level, you wouldn't see those spells in a campaign.
Right.
Like if you had a wizard capable of casting 7th level magic or higher,
yeah, I mean,
someone was fucking around. The GM was having fun. Like just the math in the game just doesn't support that organically.
I mean, case in point. I mean, look, there was like one wizard in Lord of the Rings, and he was a fucking angelic being who was capable of going toe to toe with everything in the game.
Right.
High level wizard, broken. You paid your dues. You win. Congratulations. You can reshape reality at will.
Yeah. And he was also like 3,000 years old. So
exactly. So it's all good. One of my favorite things about Gandalf is that obviously as a Maiar, he's technically ageless and has been around since the beginning of the universe. But Gandalf came to Middle Earth in the Third Age.
He did.
Not like right.
Which you'll be happy to know they already fucked up in the Rings of Power.
Never gonna watch that.
It's so great if you enjoy a train wreck. I watch it the way I watch Trolls too. I love it. It's so bad. I'm just like this. Love it.
I love that like elves like Galadriel and Celeborn and Elrond are like way older than Gandalf.
And Jackson did a good job, I think, showing Gandalf's respect and deference to these guys.
Yeah, they weren't just like, oh, I'm the god wizard.
Right.
And you're just some elf.
Right.
It's like, nope. You've been around.
That's fucking Galadriel.
Nope. You were hanging out with the Valar under the light of the two trees. Like, you are legit.
I mean, Elrond has to explain to Gandalf what happened with the ring. Right? I mean, think about that.
That's true. Right.
Because Elrond was there. Gandalf wasn't.
Yeah, Gandalf wasn't there. So I think for me, what comes down to this old school style of play is actually, and this is why sometimes I think some of these games miss for me. Is because, and why I always talk about how much I love BX and RC.
Well, we both love it.
But when I look at,
I'm not kidding. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I'll probably never play this again, but I love it.
But like when I see these other games, it's like they're so obsessed with like hyper focusing on this idea that I don't think is particularly all that compelling. This idea of like, oh, we're gonna make the dungeon crawler game. It's like,
well, yeah,
or like we're gonna like make this like hyper focused game. Like as an example, like would I play Torchbearer? Of course,
sure.
Would I play Torchbearer for a long time? No. And in fact, something that you and I talked about for a very long time. It never happened, and I'm still mad about it.
I'm sorry.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay. We wanted Torchbearer.
Oh,
Torchbearer.
Crown Bearer. Yes.
And maybe even something in between. I don't know what it would have been called.
Yeah.
But Torchbearer was even set up as this is kind of the basic.
Right. Yeah. And instead of we got second edition Torchbearer, we didn't get like
Torchbearer.
Yeah, we didn't get an expert.
We didn't get an expert. I wanted BXC, right? Or BXM, I wanted basic Torchbearer, expert Torchbearer, and like master Torchbearer. And I wanted the final one to be Crown Bearer.
And they would all be effectively different games.
And they'd almost like they are different games.
Yeah. And that's where these games miss
this idea that like, should you switch systems, as you move through a game system? I don't know if I would go that far, but I mean, in a way, kind of. Yeah.
That's kind of what was happening behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, like these games, they hyper fixate on the dungeon. And listen, I'm a guy that loves dungeon.
Sure.
I do love my dungeons. I love my dwarves, I love my dragons, I love my giants, and I love the dungeons, right? Like,
but the problem is, you and I know this. If you just have the game, then it's just like, we just go into the dungeons.
Yeah.
It's so boring.
So boring. And
I'm more excited about your random bullshit random orc encounter that you were describing.
Right.
And
because now it's like, wait, we got a faction war.
And the threat of the orcs, are they moving in? Is this a rogue band of orcs that's just raiding and pillaging, which is still a problem. Or is it like an advanced force of some new, and I hate to say it, of some new Dungeon World style front where it's like, there's an orc raider who's
that's me emulating a random encounter table. Right, but that shows the power of it.
That's right. That's right. That is you emulating a random encounter table.
And I think it's the services game where I don't remember the exact range, but when we just say dungeons would tap out like 8th level, 7th, 8th level, and
like a standard basic normal D&D. Yeah, I would say that.
Right?
I mean, once you get to the point where you can cast Pass Wall,
you're done. Right?
It's like that is like you've beat the dungeon.
Right.
You're replaying
have your victory lap.
You're replaying it because you forgot some loot, and you have quick travel enabled, and you can just speed run the dungeon.
So we're gonna hyper fixate on that part of the game, and then just build game after game after game on just that one part.
Right. Because you'll notice there's a lot of people out there who are emulating this.
Right.
But there are almost no one out there emulating expert or companion or master.
Which, circling back was one reason I was very excited about this guy.
Correct. So why did that fall fat?
Well, because the base game was still freaking basic and it was still boring.
Which is why I
don't get excited. I think Unfortunate Pumpkin said this in chat. I don't get excited by lots of death because I just immediately disengage.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm like, oh, this is a meat grinder, I'm not going to have an attachment to my character.
Correct. Well, I even said this. I said I have never been motivated or demotivated by the life or death of my character.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't really affect me.
Yeah.
And part of it is I've been a GM for so long, so I've like learned to be very detached from my PCs.
Sure.
But like I've never felt that idea of like, this is me And I need to like, for me, it's just like it is a.
I'm sure I did when I was a kid.
Yeah, of course. But for me, it's like it's a vessel that I use to explore this world, and I'm just like, I just want it to be interesting. I don't really care what really happens.
Well, and to that point, a lot of these games that like kind of hang their hat on the lethality.
Yeah.
Once you remove the fear of lethality, a lot of these games don't have anything else to keep it interesting.
Correct. Right. And to be fair, we've talked about this before. It's like gambling, right? When you go into a dungeon and you go, man, one bad roll of the dice, my character could die. That is thrilling.
Sure.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
But that's what we're talking about, where we say that's really fun, because a lot of people like to see, they go to haunted houses and they go to watch horror movies.
Feel it.
They feel that tension. They feel that excitement. And they go, wow, that is something that's new to me. I haven't felt that when I was playing my 5e game or my Pathfinder 2 game. Maybe I did once, but very quickly I realized my character was basically immortal.
Yeah.
And then when I did die, like the one time I legitimately died,
Nice.
I used the hero point. And then but then I died again, and then they cast Breath of Life on me.
Right.
And I came back with no penalty,
Right.
And then I died. And I couldn't get Breath of Life. And then they resurrected me. You know what I mean? Like there's this.
That was the power kill.
So it's like at a certain point you go, so that feeling is gone. And then you play these games, and maybe these games are like trying to, they're trying to sell that hype. They're trying to sell that nostalgia factor. They go, look how lethal our game is. You'll fear death again and feel something.
But yeah, I mean, I think if you take, I don't know, maybe we're just too comfortable from our own mortality and pain and death, right?
Perhaps.
You and I do spend a lot of time going, oh, we're 40, we're going to die soon, right?
Accurate.
Yeah, because like I'll go and I'll play these games, and if you're just offering me a meat grinder, well, then I just don't care. So at that point, what's left?
Yep.
You kill me, I'll just make a new character and come back. Hell, I might make the same character depending on the game. A lot of people like talk about Forbidden Lands, right? Oh, this game's so lethal. It's meat grinder. I'm like, oh, okay, so you're telling me I shouldn't take it seriously,
right? And I will actually counterpoint to that.
I don't think that's entirely true.
I don't think it's true. I don't think it's true.
I haven't looked at the odds on the crit tables.
It's very low.
That's my feeling.
It's not like it's zero.
Sure.
I mean, if you break, there's a chance you will die.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
It is not a meat grinder.
But it's like, less than 10%.
Correct.
Which, the chance of you dying in these games, if you, failed to save or got to 0 hit points, was basically 100%, because 0 hit points, you're dead.
0 points, you're dead, and that's it.
And most saves killed you.
Yeah, and most save versus poison, you die.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that I don't think that Forbidden Lands is trying to obfuscate that. In fact, I think that part of what they're trying to do is create more of a fun experience for when your character goes down. It's like, here's another random roll to find out what happened.
No. And to be clear, I think they're doing a good job. They're not trying to be
correct.
I keep pointing at this. This game hasn't done anything particular. I don't know if this game has.
No, but you could point to a lot of just the basic OSR games where they're trying to be the edgy
DCC for sure, right?
DCC for sure. These sort of, we're super edgy. Look how everyone dies.
I don't get that vibe from FL.
Fantasy fucking Vietnam. I do not get that from Forbidden
people.
Lands.
Feel that way about the game,
right?
And I'm like, oh, is that really true? And then I get it, I'm like, oh, that's not true at all. This is another moderate counter, right? Maybe a severe counter.
Well. And I think it remains to be seen. I think there's an element of there where it's like, depending on what it is and depending on what randomly comes up, it could be very devastating and destructive to you. But
we did roll a Death Knight.
Correct. But I mean, you cast a hyper overpowered spell that potentially could have fucked you up, ended up doubling, and that barely took out the knight. So if that hadn't occurred, who's to say what would have happened? Yeah. But here's the thing. That's fine. I like the chance of it. I don't need an encounter to be balanced. I don't need you guys to lose. You guys didn't fucking die. This fucking session sucks.
Oh, there's some groups that are like that, though.
I know. It's fucked up.
Like, if someone didn't die, do we even play the game?
Right. And I get it. Like, I mean, we're not going to go off into a death conversation here. I'm not saying that death doesn't have a place.
Sure.
But like, it's just, I think that feralness, that visceralness of anything could happen in this game. Mm-hmm. Or anything could happen in one of these games is very appealing to the modern gamer that is used to playing everything by the book.
Used to having everything like safe. Because I mean, 5th edition isn't a particularly well balanced game, but it is a safe game.
What does OSR mean to me? Like, one of the things I think about when I think about that is, like, as a player, when I'm playing in a game, I do the math. Mm-hmm. I go, oh, this is a moderate encounter. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is a severe encounter. Oh, it's gonna, you know what I mean? Like, I can math it out.
Yep.
But with OSR games, there's no point.
Even if you're like, this is a higher level fight, that still doesn't mean
it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the fun of that is, like, we want to ruin these games for ourselves.
Like you and I specifically?
Just us, these people, we want to ruin because whether it's because we take the game very seriously and we're like, we are our character, or it's because, we're used to being, kind of gamey gamers and we like to win the game.
Sure.
We can't help ourselves but try to beat the game. And, and in doing so, we ruin it for ourselves.
And we don't want to play it anymore.
And we don't want to play it for it anymore. And so
this is like,
we remove because
this is why you spend so much time pre-house ruling the game before you show it to our group.
Right.
And I know some people will be like, Derek, you haven't even played this game, right?
Correct.
Right. But and don't get me wrong, I kind of get where they're coming from.
Sure.
Too,
well,
right.
So do I.
But I understand where you're coming from, which is like, yeah, you're playing with a group that's relatively experienced.
Correct.
Even Bob at this point's got years
absolutely
of experience.
We had hold on a second. Hold on a second before you did it.
Sure.
We got a super chat. It was our first super chat from Star. Thanks, Star. Star says, not able to catch most streams due to work, but wanted to show my support. Love OSR games, but lament the lack of stronghold and mass combat rules in most of them in these modern games. Love the streams.
Get this one.
Yes, Adventure Conqueror King system.
Actually, they're coming out with the second edition too. So
yeah, it has a lot of stuff in there about.
There's an entire book just for combat,
mass combat,
and another book for
domain war or something. It's called.
And then you combine basically as one book.
Got it.
But they're 2 books in one.
Yeah, but okay.
This book is sufficient, but he really like doubles down on it.
But yeah, so we were saying about like the lethality and like the idea that like people want. They just want to be able. They want to feel like, oh wow, anything could happen in this game, and I don't necessarily. I can't math it out, and I can't ruin the game for myself by, basically just figuring out and doing the math and ending up with a situation where,
Yeah, and that's certainly appeal with these games. Also on the
and you were saying
side,
about with Forbidden Lands, like right, like I was trying to get ahead of that.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I totally forgot my train of thought there. Yeah, you were trying to get ahead of that because, you got experienced players, and like. I didn't read the encumbrance rules, but if I had been encumbered, I would have, and then probably would have been like, well, what the hell's this?
Correct. Immediately.
Oh,
I even said, I was like, immediately.
I mean, I saw part of the conversation on the Discord, but I know Ayla's group is very different than our group.
Correct.
In terms of things like pushing. Like, I think any roll that failed, we basically pushed.
Correct. I mean, there was a couple of times that like the initial failed roll had like 3 ones.
Yeah.
And people were like, that's not where they're like, that's a lot of willpower, but also that is a lot to take at this point in this juncture. But if we were like in a safe position.
Oh yeah, people, they would have broke.
They would have happily
we broke in the dungeon. So I was like, oh, we took care of all the threats.
Right.
Tim's right here.
Yep.
All right, I'll break.
Right. You broke.
Wasn't even a quarter day to heal up.
Not even, because you broke. And
he
then,
made a performance
and
check.
then Tim performed and got you back on your feet.
Yeah.
And then you have nowhere for what's
our first session.
Right. The end of our first session.
Yeah.
But it was our first session, and you guys were already like, oh, yeah, we can just kind of follow this play pattern.
Yeah, I'd read the book like a year ago and freshened up before a campaign. And, Bob was familiar with D-Bone and whatnot. But, like George, Tim, and Kaz didn't make it for the first session. But, George and Tim, were picking it up as we were playing.
Right.
Like, they may have glanced through it once. I don't know. But, very quick, Tim's like, oh, yeah, I'll just do this.
Right. Yep. Right. And again, which is what I expected.
Of course.
And now
because you're playing with people who play this game for over 20 years.
And so my concern is I do think the game is fun, but I worry that without the changes, it won't be interesting enough. And then people will lose interest.
Right, because we'll quickly find the holes.
You'll quickly find the holes.
Yeah.
And again, it's not like you guys are trying to be like car op,
No, I mean, it's actually a curse, right?
Yes. That's what I'm saying. It's like you can't help it. Like you can't look at the situation and not
would
go.
Be a great superpower, right? People are always like, "Oh man, I want to fly our super strength." I would love to have selective forgetfulness,
right? Selective amnesia.
Could you imagine playing like classic EQ for the first time again?
Oh yeah, going all the way back, and not even being knowing modern games,
right?
So my opinion isn't
right. Just like I want to experience this for the first time as if it was 1996. Right.
And to be fair, I think a lot of people feel that, and I think that's why a lot of people pick these games.
Yeah, but it's automatic though, right? I can't not approach this with 30 plus years of role playing experience, right?
Yes.
We'll laugh about how I still remember a dungeon from 20 years ago, but it's actually sad.
Yeah.
Because what I want is to, go into Forge of Fury the first time.
Correct.
Right. And be amazed at it. Right.
Right.
And so there's absolutely you're your own worst enemy with these games.
Absolutely.
What's the answer here? Because I don't want a game to just continuously increase the complexity to such absurd levels where, sure, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I also don't care.
That would be called Northern Reaches.
Accurate. You know, like I don't want that, but like, yeah, also, you know, some of these games, like they don't hold my attention, right?
Correct.
Like Dragonbane. Yeah, it's a great game, well made. I love the book. The art's phenomenal with it. Like, but I've also played this for 30 years. Not literally that, but you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I've played like the parts of that, you know,
Yeah.
the game is trying to cover.
I get it.
You know, and I was like, before the stream, one of the things we have is like,
Sure.
you know, I look at systems as tools, right? And I'm like, oh, you have this itch, use this scratch. And for me, like, I always try to go, where does this game fit, right? And I don't have a good place for that game, right? Doesn't mean it's a bad game. It just means I got other things that fill that slot.
Right.
Right. You know, example, someone was like, oh, I want domain and old school feel. Okay, I got a game that does that for you. That's literally what the purpose of this game is, right? If you don't care about that, don't play this game.
And yet we played that game and got bored.
Because I don't, and this is our takeaway from that was, even though we thought we really liked these old school games, I don't think we do.
Yeah, kind of.
I mean, that's what we walked away from.
But I also know I get just as bored with the over-the-top superpower.
Oh, 100%.
Which is why
Pathfinder
we won't
2
play any role-playing
bores
games.
the hell out of me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, it's kind of interesting at first. The first, you know, couple levels where you're kind of just like feeling it out a little bit. But then, like, once you get into the thing,
once you kind of get what's going on, you're like, what am I doing?
yeah, it's very unappealing. Especially when you get to the point where you're like, the whole game feels like you're waiting to, you know,
oh yeah,
turn on your build or whatever.
Yeah.
You're like, so I'm not even cool yet. I gotta pay the price of not being cool. You know,
right. Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I think that you know, OSR.
This is ultimately why we just can never be happy.
Well, that is also true. But it's also why, you know, when I talked about what does old school mean to us?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is not a whole lot.
That's fairly true.
You know, because for us, it's not this like panacea that a lot of people treat it like it's this cure to all of the modern gaming ills.
Right.
You know, because it strips away all the excessive mechanics and reveals the pure glowing heart of RPGdom. Well, that sounds great and all, but ultimately, I think that they just don't hold my interest.
Hmm.
You know, and I think that
You know, there's a little bit of grass is greener. Right?
absolutely, of
You
course,
know, a lot of people didn't play because we certainly don't hate it. You know, we love the roots.
Right. But I'm penalized because I also, so you might say, okay, so go play a more interesting game then, Derek. Okay. But I also hate the complexity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think I mentally think about playing, like being the game master. Like there was somebody on our Patreon. I forgot. I'm sorry if I forgot you. I think you're new. And they said, a new patron. And they said, you know, we said, what are you playing? And he goes, oh, I'm GMing a 3.5 edition campaign right now. And
nice.
And everybody was like, oh, ooh, sorry. Yeah, because they all knew what it's like to GM a high. He's like, it's the end of a campaign. So they're all high level 3rd edition.
Well, I feel like this person knew what they were signing up for.
Oh, maybe, but you know, hey, we got someone who just joined the adventure.
Oh.
It's Joshua W. They are strong. Welcome to the adventure, Joshua. Enjoy your new awesome emojis, and thank you for your loyalty badge. And
we got to update those emojis.
We do need to update those emojis.
They are painful.
They are out. They are out of date.
The mammoths no longer burn. So.
Yes, we do not need the burning mammoths. We need a whiteboard emoji. Is what I've been told.
Emoji.
But thank you so much for the support, and we really, really appreciate that. That is awesome, and people like you would allow us to talk esoterically about old school Renaissance philosophy and
like what is even this stream about?
What is even this stream about? Which we will be wrapping up here shortly. So thank you so much for that. You know, yeah, it's been a very long time since I've played a game, I think, that made me feel the way that all these people are feeling when they're playing Dragonbane.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so I for me, it's like I don't think I can go back home. You know what I mean? Like for me, it's not even an issue of nostalgia. It's like, you know, when I look at those game systems, I understand the promise, and I love the idea of these low complexity games and being able to sort of not have to worry about all these endless rules and feat trees, and as a player or a GM, you know, what's the CR of this? Is this an appropriate balance? Oh, someone didn't show up today. Did all my encounters fucked? I get it. But at the same time, when I go back to these games,
you want a little meat on the bone.
Yeah. And I think the truth of the matter is the problem has never been, in some ways, the system.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the campaign.
Well, yes and no. I mean, like I said, we had a campaign that all of us were very excited about.
I think we were over-ambitious in the component of that campaign.
Well,
because if you remember how that Adventure Conqueror King game started, it kind of just started off with you guys go into a dungeon.
Yeah, we basically didn't really do a good job tying the campaign.
We did not do a good job of tying.
And part of it might be because, well, you're a level 1 basic character. Like, you're not going to be doing anything
Correct.
that's remotely cool.
Correct.
Which, well, that's part of the problem.
That is part of the problem. It's hard to be important when you suck.
Right.
And that's why a lot of these campaigns, you start off as, the nobody, whether it's D&D or Adventure Conqueror King or what, you're a level 1 nobody. You're not anybody important, because how could you be?
Right. You haven't done anything.
You haven't done anything, and you don't have the power to do these things. And so then so then what can we do in the game? Not much.
Right. Go find some goblins.
Right.
And hopefully they'll get killed by Medusas.
I will say this about Forbidden Lands and Dragonbane. I mean, you start off kind of as powerful as you're going to be.
Well, right.
Like you get more skills or Dragonbane, your skills get up and you obviously get experience points.
Sure.
I mean, you earned, I think, 7 experience points.
Yeah.
You could buy 2 talents, at 3
And a point left over.
and have a point left over.
Yeah.
So you're clearly gaining that power, but your hit points aren't going to change.
No.
one else's hit points are going to change.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
And if I die in 5 sessions, I can re-roll and be fine.
right. But I'm saying is that like, it's not like you're in a situation where the game is starting and you're like, oh, I couldn't possibly think about dealing with that issue because I'm so low level.
Yeah, it's super interesting too, right? Because FL doesn't really have much of progression in it. And it allows you to do things like not only what you just described, you can be cool at the beginning, but flip that around. The stuff you're doing is cool.
Yes.
Right? So
sure.
The 3 leads that you dropped, one was a village. We didn't know a lot about that. You're like, I have prepared for that. So,
I basically told the group, I said, hey,
we'll cut that one.
I said, you have 3 legends. But one of them I didn't really prepare, so please.
The other one was go into a tomb of the Wolf Slayer and loot his like awesome bow,
right?
Which that sounds awesome,
right?
And the other one is go take the ruby from the serpent god in the temple of whatever,
the temple of the snakes or whatever, yeah,
right, which is obviously out of Conan and also cool,
completely out of Conan, yeah.
So both these things, like if I had to be like, oh, what level is that in D&D? I'd be like, oh, these sound both like at least 3rd, if not 5th or 7th level adventures.
Well, I mean, case in point, Death Knight attacked you in the tomb.
Yeah, that's what? Well, in 3rd edition, it's a CR8,
something like that.
Know?
Yeah,
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So that makes FL enjoyable because it's like you get to the good bits kind of right away, right?
Right.
And it's just funny because a game like this, like Basic, has progression in it, but when you look at the progression, it's non-existent. The progression is, my saves might get better. My attack bonus might get better, or Thaco or their version of Thaco.
Throw versus roll.
I actually don't like that in this game.
I know.
Honestly, part of my problem with this game is I don't like Labyrinth Lord.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Like I probably would have been happier with if they had used. I don't know. It's just the throws were dumb. So, sorry, Alex. They were dumb. You might get a spell if you're a caster, and if you were a thief, you got percentage update. But other than that, you got jack shit. You know, a couple hit points. Like that was it. You didn't get feats, anything like that. So like when we talk about progression, what we're talking about, right? There's nothing there, right? And the way you would progress in these games, outside of like getting your castle and stronghold at the end of the game, was basically through magic items,
right? But by and large, well, I mean it's sort of in your control, but by and large, gaining magical items wasn't in your control.
No, you had to go get it.
This was long before magical item shops and before you could just build and make anything you want. Basically, you got the items that the GM gave you.
Right. So it's weird because we go, we like progression, right? Our challenge with FL is going to be like
Forbidden Lands.
Forbidden Lands is where's the progression going to be? Like how long can we really realistically play this game?
Correct.
Because part of the charm of the game or advantage is, oh man, we could die and it's totally fine. Doesn't matter because you could bring in a 0 experience character and play with a 50 experience character and it's fine.
I will say this. Let's assume for a moment that you're able to keep your track record going, and you're getting 5, 6, 7, 8 experience points per session. So let's say we're theoretically going to be playing monthly, even though that has not occurred yet. But
Sure.
Weekly, even though that hasn't occurred. So in a month, let's say you have 28 experience points. All right. With that 28 experience points, you could have taken a couple of skills from 0 to 1. You could have taken a number of talents from 0 to 1 to 2, and your character might now have 6 talents that they didn't have when you made your character.
Sure.
If that character died and you made a new character, I think you would feel,
I think you would too.
this character is not as cool or powerful as my old character.
Right, but I think you would also go, it wasn't that far of a gap. So in a way, it's almost like worst of both worlds. Because you would clearly feel the loss.
Yes.
Because, that did take time. It took a month for me to get that far. And not only that, 7 experience points does imply that, we're doing a lot every session.
True.
You got to check literally all the boxes, right?
I mean, you could theoretically get 10, I think, is the most you can get.
Sure, but 7's when you're getting 7, you're doing more than, I showed up.
Correct.
Hopefully
one would hope that
you're doing it anyway. I'm just saying that there's a little bit of attention to detail to routinely churn that out, right? So it's not nothing, and it did take time, and so you feel bad that you lost all that, right?
Yeah.
Which is where death can be a problem in these games, and again, people who talk about how deadly OSR is, again, that's a low level concept. Because even the reason Raised Dead exists is because Gary Gax was someone losing a character they spent months, if not years, working on is stupid.
Right. Unless you're an elf, in which case get fucked.
Because you're an elf, right? You can get resurrect later, but elves are broken. That's why you did it, right? So I get that. But even in this game, this acclaimed the hardest game ever made. You're supposed to come back from the dead.
Sure.
If you're low level enough where it doesn't matter, then sure, roll again. But otherwise, come back from the dead, right? But we don't come back from the dead really in this game. I think there's a raised dead cell, but it's super high level.
Yeah, I think it's pretty tough.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's other complications.
But again, also too, it's also a game where when you do quote unquote go to 0 hit points, you roll on a chart and you're not necessarily guaranteed to die. I will see.
No, I'm just saying. I think it's both.
I mean, some of the talents in this game are quite powerful.
Sure,
especially at rank 2 and rank 3. And I think if your character had those and then didn't have those, I think you would feel.
I'm not saying there isn't a progression, but it is not 20 level vertical.
It is not vertical the way D&D is vertical. Yeah. This is. Slow ramp, right. And it works the other way too, which is what somebody in one of our chats said, which was they said they were playing a Forbidden Lands campaign, and they said they were about 100 XP in, give or take, a lot. And if you do the math on that, let's say 5 a session on average,
sure, yeah,
20 sessions, right? Yeah. That's a good chunk
campaign.
Good campaign. And they said, but 8 town guardsmen with crossbows could still kill my character in the first round of combat. I mean, again, I have these talents that'll let me, I might be
even Conan can't take on 8 dudes.
Exactly. And this person was that's really cool to me because it means that I am stronger and I do feel stronger. Sure. And I mean, any one of those people, I could completely destroy them, but there's still 8 of them and there's still 1 of me. And
that's good. That's good balance, right?
I think so.
It keeps it
I loved, you know this because you felt the same way. I loved when we played that super hacked 3 hacks deep, 5 hacks deep, Dungeon Time Extreme in our 5th edition campaign, and I made a random encounter table, and I put a red dragon on it
naturally,
and
a high level red dragon, of course,
not a high level, but
And you might be wondering why this happened. It's because we were all fans. Derek and I were big fans of the 3rd edition Dark Mountains random encounter table.
That's right, the Dark Mountains CR8, EL8. 3rd edition, probably it was like a CR8, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna roll this, and I love that you guys were like, wow, this thing is scary and it's gonna kill us, and then a bunch of your hirelings with bows were able to drive it off, and that's wow, that feels very appropriate.
It's the advantage of bounded accuracy and advantage.
Advantage of bounded accuracy and advantage. Yeah. We did have another super chat from Grimlocked, who says, so I should not spend $40 to $60 on another hardback promising to give me back my childhood.
Or we're talking about Dragonbane, or
I mean, I don't know if he's talking about any of these OSR games. I mean, the answer is, I think that a lot of us buy this hoping to recapture that magical essence of, being like the first time you find the chest of treasure and there's gold inside and a potion of extra healing, you know.
I do like the chest of 300 gold, a potion of healing, and a +1 longsword.
Right, and you know, you think about the mental image of that, right? The chest is flipped open. It's like it's like the size of like a Foot Locker. It's flipped open. You see the gold coins. There's the potion with the blue liquid kind of sitting in the corner, and then hanging out the, you know, it's a blade buried in the coin. Its hilt gleaming about a foot above the point. The magical sword. You know? Yeah. And I think that, to me, is ultimately what OSR is. It's a feeling.
You know, it's funny. I associate that emotion with 3rd edition.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I love 3rd edition.
I do love 3rd edition.
But
3rd edition is like my middle ground for me.
It is. And in fact, I put it right in the middle. But I said this. It's too complex for what it delivers.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're like talking about all of it.
Yes.
Like,
Correct.
That's the whole thing. I both love how much there is for 3rd edition and hate it.
Correct.
And like, it's so funny because like my moods will completely flip where I'll be like completely in love with 3rd edition and then I'll like not want to look at it for years.
Yes.
Because of the splat books.
Well, it's still a lot.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. I mean, you know, it has the CR system. It's not as, you know, I mean, like, for example, I'll give you an example. Going back to feel, 3rd edition introduced the CR system. There was always this kind of implicit idea of balance in 2nd edition and 1st edition, but it really didn't mean anything.
There was the idea of levels and stars and double stars.
Right. Levels. Yes. Right. Hit dice, stars, double stars. But I loved, a lot of people hated this. I loved it. You loved it. In 3rd edition, they gave us these CR rankings, but they purposely undervalued dragons.
Yes. Yes. I love that.
Because they wanted you as a GM to go, oh, I can throw this CR3 at my party because it's a CR3 and it should be tough, but not like that. But no, this was a dragon. They purposely undertuned it. Or sorry, overtuned it for its CR. And so it is going to be scary and kick your party's ass.
Right. Every time.
Every time. Or, you know.
And listen, man, it's on the cover of the game. Like, a lot of people gave me shit for that. I thought that was brilliant.
I thought it was great too.
It was brilliant.
But here's the thing: they didn't even tell the GM this. It wasn't like we only learned this.
No, because you just do the math.
You do the math.
Because the math is always consistent.
But also, like, you know, people you know talked about like how it came up like in a seminar or something like years later where they're like, oh yeah, those original dragon CRs were way off because we wanted dragons to be scary.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was them making solos before they knew how to make solos. And if you look at the
that's actually very accurate. Yeah.
If you look at Wizards Presents, right, our favorite books, they actually talk about, you know, when they came up with the idea of solo. Well, what's the most iconic solo fight?
Yeah, dragon.
Dragon.
Absolutely, dragon.
You know.
Woodland Fellowship says basically anytime Link opens a chest in Legend of Zelda, you know,
100%. Oh, again, we didn't grow up on wargaming. We grew up on Legend of Zelda, the original Final Fantasy, Dragon Warrior. Yeah. You know, like, opening the chest and getting the fat loots. It was awesome.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I just think it's, you know, I just think it's very cool. And again, you know, someone they're mentioning Hero Quest and stuff like that. And
Hero Quest is great too.
I mean, Hero Quest is great.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, sure. Like the idea of like, I'm going to play a Hero Quest campaign as an adult.
Sure.
And play like, I don't know, whatever it is. Like
there's like 10 adventures.
10 adventures. Yeah. Probably not.
I don't think you level or anything.
Probably
you
not.
just know that you survived.
I mean, I barely made it through a Descent campaign. You know.
That's impressive, yeah.
You know, Gloomhaven, we petered out on that because we were just like, okay.
I did always have a sick fascination with Road to Legend.
Yes.
The original Road to Legend.
The original Road to Legend, yes. Yeah, right. Well, no, because the Descent 2nd edition was just already a campaign.
Yeah, I think they actually called it Road to Legend. It was super confusing when you Google it because like Road to Legend now refers to like the app or something. I don't know.
Oh, you know what? You're right.
But there was an expansion in Descent 1st edition called Road to Legend, which I loved.
Right. Because it basically turned a board game into D&D.
Yeah.
It was it did nothing. It's basically all it did. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. It worked. I liked it.
So, I mean, again, I think that, you know, we're going to wrap up. But again, for me, OSR is not about the mechanics. It's about the feel of the game. And I think that some people, some groups, I think they've gotten it wrong about what made the game so charming.
I think a lot of the creators.
And I think I think a lot of people have or even just players. I think a lot of people,
a lot of players too have the wrong.
Like for example, like I know that a lot of people talk about like rulings over rules. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing because I like doing that, but I also don't necessarily know that doesn't have to be an OSR thing.
No, I don't thought so either.
You know, that's just a stylistic thing.
That's why you have a human being in the role of
right.
a game
Otherwise,
master.
you're just playing a board game.
Yeah.
Now, again, OSR games do ask that a lot of you because they're pretty rules light, which is why when I see OSR games that are really thick, I start to go, what is going on here?
Yeah, actually, part of me was like what's in this book? Right?
I think there's a lot of random tables.
Which I can accept that, you know. But even this guy here, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is double column.
To be fair, that's RC. So it's got like...
Oh, okay. Yeah.
know,
It's got it all in
like
here.
if I go... Here,
yeah, strongholds. Okay.
If I go to the actual...
yeah, because you have the actual, like...
I have the
yeah.
actual,
So what's the basic one?
Nothing.
How do they break it up?
You have... Here, this is like how you make... These are characters.
Okay.
This is...
And that's probably mostly spells.
No, they have a different book.
Oh, it's a different book?
Magic.
Oh, wow. I'm impressed they have that much.
You have characters,
rules for characters.
magic, treasures, monsters, and then adventure.
Wait, 2 of those books are just random tables. Okay, so this also has some like basic rules.
I think the characters book has the basic rules, but actually, remember, like a lot of the rules are actually like in part of the GM's thing. You know, like
That's
for example,
true.
the adventures book has full rules for designing and playing dungeon, wilderness, and waterborne adventures. You know, that's another area.
Yeah.
That if you look
we
at
have
old
not
school,
done a lot of water.
and I don't even mean like because when people hear waterborne adventures, they immediately think sailing, but that's not like old school D&D had this like very like weird obsession with like waterborne adventures. There are all these rules.
Yeah,
for
I mean,
aquatic combat. And,
we didn't play them, but like the 5e had that compendium book based on classics of was it Ghosts of Salt?
Oh, Ghosts of Saltmarsh.
And those are all classic adventures that I don't think we ever played any of those ones.
No, I don't think so. Well, I think that's the sinister secret of Saltmarsh. It's just one adventure. Is the original adventure. It's the sinister secrets of Saltmarsh.
Well, yeah, but the compendium had like I don't know what they threw in there.
Well, yeah, they turned it into a big thing.
It's like the other book they have.
They turned it into a big thing. I mean, I don't know what else they put in
the
there,
tavern
but-
or whatever.
Pepper says the OSE books being split up like that is super charming to me. Honestly, it's pretty cool. Although I think it would get annoying then when you had to like flip open to 3 books.
Yeah, that part would be annoying.
Yeah, that part would be. A little bit
I would probably end up with both.
Yeah, honestly, what I would probably do with these books is I would love and then I would end up printing them and getting them spiral bound.
Yeah.
And making little ledgers and portfolios so I could have 3 pages open at once.
Yeah.
By flipping it over and just having it behind my screen or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a whole thing. So I liked it. And yeah, I mean, I think that what it comes down to for me is that like a lot of these games are hyper focused on this minimalist, rules and these rulings only. And I think that what they're missing is that the charm of the game wasn't because of the rules or not because of the rules. It was just because of the way that people felt when they were playing them. And they had this like, they had this fear and this wonder.
I think the lack of rules helps support that, right? Let me rephrase that. Rules can get in the way.
Sure.
You know, and I think we have that reaction a lot of times with like a PF2, for example, you know, where sitting behind the screen, we were so consumed by just running the damn game.
Right.
We didn't have much capacity left to do much of anything else.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
But to be fair, like I said, like when we were playing, the last old school game I played was 5e with our super hacks.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, number one, I didn't know the rules.
You didn't know, yeah.
Number two, I felt very comfortable making shit up on the fly, whatever.
I mean, you were basically playing like PBTA.
Yes.
It's instead of roll 2d6 beat 7, it was roll d20 beat 11.
But it was even more complicated than that because basically it was PBTA if there was 20 degrees of success.
Yeah, it's true.
Because it's like if you roll really well, it would be like a really good result.
Yeah.
And if you roll just a little bad, it would be like a little bad. And if you rolled to the point where you were playing 5th edition D&D, and your character would make an attack roll and roll like a 5 and get like a total of 8. And the creature had an armor class of like 15 or something like that. And I'm like, oh, you missed by 7. And I'd be like, yeah, the creature, you swing your axe. I'm like, the creature brings his shield up. Your axe sinks into the wood.
Right.
The creature grins menacingly as he twists his body to the side. And your axe goes away from you. And you're disarmed.
Yeah.
Well, why? Because you missed. I don't know. You missed by 7.
Yeah,
you suck. That is in no way, shape, or form a rule.
You're just playing PBTA.
But see, the thing was like, yeah, but like on a hyper focus, like
he brought PBTA to a D&D fight.
I brought PBTA. Hey, you brought a Pathfinder character to a Dread game. I brought PBTA to a dungeon. But the other thing was, I would just make shit up and just, you know, I know it feels like it's a ruling, but it wasn't really a ruling, and it wasn't really a house rule. It was literally just.
I mean, it's a ruling.
It was me making. Here's the difference. Ruling? No, it was me making GM moves.
Yeah, that's a ruling outside PBTA.
Is it though?
I mean, now we're getting super pedantic.
Is it though?
Leave your thoughts in the comments or chat.
Yeah, you want to.
Is making a rules-based decision a ruling or not?
Right.
And if not, what is it?
Well, it definitely wasn't rules-based because I didn't know those.
Well, I mean, no, they applied the mechanics.
That's like the most nice last call thing ever all the time. Are rulings made at a game table fundamentally different than a GM move in a PBTA game?
Right.
And I think they are. I don't know why they aren't, but I think that they are. Now, Beowulf says a fiction-based ruling. That is true.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can add an adjective to it if you want.
I think though, what it comes though is it's like it was inspired by the mechanical actions of the game as well. So it wasn't purely just fictional. If that makes any sense. Let me put it another way.
Sort of, except the mechanics also determined the fiction. The mechanics went, I missed, so in the fiction I didn't hit.
Yeah. I mean,
and mechanically, I missed by a lot.
Like,
so I wasn't close to hitting.
Fundamentally.
So what does that mean fictionally?
Correct.
And your interpretation was I got fucking disarmed.
Correct. Or something else.
Or whatever, right?
Whatever.
You know? I still think we're splitting hairs on this.
I mean,
this is something only we would care about.
It is very esoteric. I guess what it comes down to is that fundamentally it's like, do I, Derik, think that I could play an RPG that had no rules?
I don't think you could. Well, I mean, obviously you could play it. Would you enjoy it? I don't think you would enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not like long term. You might do it like for a con or like as an academic exercise.
Because for fundamentally purposes, World of Dungeons, which is what we played for Bob's birthday bash, right? It's PBTA,
sure,
but there's one move.
There's one move, yeah,
right. Which is basically
but that's still a rule.
Did you roll? Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, that would be my guiding hubris. You'd roll your d20. Mm-hmm. Did you roll high or did you roll low? Right. And based off of that and the prevailing situation in the fiction, I'm going to essentially there will be no rules, only rulings.
Right.
Everything will just be completely, like. I rolled low. Roll D percentage. Why? I want to roll to see. Like,
well, I mean, that's not what that game was, though, right? Like everyone understood the same base mechanic, and they also therefore understood what they were good at, and what they were bad at.
Correct.
And so they still had their agency.
That's why I think
if you go complete ruling, I don't know if you still have agency.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I do think rules are good.
Yeah.
Because I do think I think that too much rulings, not rules, can start to rob the players of agency.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's advocating not having rules. What would that even mean?
One of the things that
Cowboy and Indians.
One of the things that drives people insane that I love about Powered by the Apocalypse. This just came out yesterday in the Discord. Which, by the way, if you're not a member of the Knights of the Last Call Patreon and you enjoy esoteric RPG philosophy discussions, come on in and join us. Or also you could play in one of our like 30 different community games and. None of them are 5th edition D&D, to the best of my knowledge. So if that's what you're looking for, probably not the best. We don't hate 5th edition D&D. In fact, come run a 5th edition campaign. You'll probably get some people to play for it. But by and large,
5th edition's actually getting some popularity on the channel at the moment. There's a whole Fate Forge thing going on.
Oh, the Fate Forge. Yes. Yeah. I know Ben's been running it. So you might want to enjoy us. You might enjoy it. You might check us out. Patreon.com/Knights-of-the-Last-Call. There's a link in the description below. And again, it's not for everybody. We're a pretty small and select group. But
Jesse, if you keep forgetting, consider this your reminder. You can click on that link right now while this video continues to stream.
There you go. That's a nice little plug. Thank you, Mr. Smith. But no, I like to think that we're a pretty cool bunch. But yeah, like I really feel like that when you don't have the rules and the game is just too flitty, too whatever.
Yeah, you don't even know anything.
Then it's like I feel like I'm not even playing a game anymore, and that's important to me.
Playing make believe.
Well, that's important, and this is something I talk about in the Discord. It's important to me that I'm playing a game.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to play a game. Yeah. That is what I'm here to do, and that means I want to be able to use these rules, and I want to be able to sort of apply them in a way that makes sense. Obviously, I get there's a sweet spot where if there's too many of them, I start to become overwhelmed. And I definitely think that in my mind, personally, the fiction, I struggled with this with Pathfinder 2nd edition. I struggled with this in 4th edition. My sense after all these years is that for me, the fiction is more important than the mechanics.
Yes.
Yes.
And I do think I struggle with mechanic first games.
Yeah. Because it just gets to that point where you go, this is so stupid.
Well, because it's a mechanic first game that still relies on the fiction. Like, you're still playing a role-playing game.
Right. If we were playing just a board game,
then it would be fine.
Then it'd be fine. You go, this is so, like, for example, you're playing Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
It's mechanics based first.
Yeah.
I'm going to equip 3 swords to my snake.
Yep. Totally fine.
Totally fine.
Yep.
Because it's just whatever.
Yeah.
Now, if you.
Funny even.
Yeah, funny even. It's kind of like when you play Pathfinder 2nd edition and you have a race that has multiple hands.
Yeah.
And then the game says you can't use more than 2 of them.
Right.
And rightfully so. Because it would be broken.
Sure.
If you could just suddenly have multiple hands because you were this race.
And that's what the game cares about.
But it doesn't make any sense in the fiction.
What do you do with that?
What do you do with that?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
So I definitely struggle with those games.
And so when I like fiction first games, when I go into a game that cares about the mechanics and cares about the fairness and cares about the balance, I start feeling that friction, and sort of, running against me. But if you go too far the other way and you end up with some super ultra light OSR game, then I feel like there's nothing under the surface. It's a kiddie pool.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they have to be mutually exclusive. I mean, that's clearly how these games
They are clearly being doing. I think it's because.
But I don't think that's because of anything innate in it.
Because probably
part of it's because of 50 years we're still playing the same fucking game more or less.
That is absolutely true. By the way, Jesse says emotional abuse worked. He just joined.
Excellent. Glad to have you.
Great. Welcome aboard, Jesse. Glad to have you. Emotional abuse. That's also what we're about here.
We definitely have a lot of emotional abuse on the channel.
Golden Cat says Fate Forge's 5e as 5e was enjoyable. I didn't play it for 10 years like most people did. I don't get the super hate for 5e. To be fair, we played it a little, we played it for a few months and then we said, let's go play Pathfinder 1.
5e absolutely has a place in my toolbox.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite game, but it's got a lot of things it does right.
Alia says, I like a good rule structure, but I like rules that give a solid framework for creativity. As Derik said, it's a delicate balance. Now, that is very true.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I do like, to a certain extent, I like Forbidden Lands. Because in Forbidden Lands, everyone understands, like, there is no DC system.
Right.
So the game is very clear. You need a 6.
Right.
And as a player, even if you don't know the inherent odds of what your dice rolls are exactly,
right.
There's
a table if you really care.
They even tell you, because they're not trying to hide it.
Yeah.
You look at it, you go, I get it. I know what I need to do.
Yeah.
It's just like Dragonbane in that way. Dragonbane's even simpler, of course. I need to roll under my skill.
Right.
Full stop. But then in Forbidden Lands, they give the GM this tool and they say you can give them dice. Mm-hmm. You can take dice away. You can use gear, which will give you more bonus.
Yep.
You can use better gear. Your ability scores might be damaged and then you have less. But as a GM, I have the levers of being able to grant these dice or take these dice away. Just like how in Dragonbane or in 5th edition, you have advantage and disadvantage.
Yeah.
And, in Blades in the Dark, you have P and E.
Right. Actually, when she said that, I assumed you were going to immediately go to Blades in the Dark.
Well, and that I was going to say, but I love that.
Because that whole game is designed around this, like, structured conversation.
It is a and what is an RPG but a structured conversation?
Well, RPG is a conversation. It debates on how well it's structured, right? I would actually say, Blades in the Dark kind of codified a lot of the Mother May I of your classic D&D experience.
Absolutely. And that's
a useful tool. Like, if you don't know how to run an old school style D&D game, you should probably play Blades in the Dark a little bit.
Well, and I've tried to express this before and I failed. But like the thing that I really love about position and effect in Blades in the Dark, and let's just focus on position here, okay, which is controlled.
Yeah.
Right. Controlled, meaning like the player character
is
in an advantaged position.
Yeah.
Risky, which is, look, we're rolling dice because we're not sure if we're going to succeed or not, but otherwise it wouldn't be risky. And then desperate.
You're fucked.
You're in a bad situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the thing. There's 3 ways of looking at this. 1, you can create a very small set of very specific rules. Let's be very clear. These OSR games have very specific rules.
Oh, yeah.
The rules are very discrete.
Yeah.
They're not a lot of them.
The rules that they have are like, this is how this works.
This is how this works.
It's not really open for debate.
And there's 5 of them.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, but in the possibility space of our fictional game where anything can happen,
right? Clearly,
the rules that you have given me are insufficient.
Right.
So then what am I supposed to do when I create these other areas? And the game says rulings, not rules. You're like, okay, fair. Then you take more modern games who said, well, that's kind of tough, right? Because you're essentially creating a rule on the spot.
Yeah.
So
how do you train a new game master to do that well?
So, it's tough, very tough.
Yeah, and if your game doesn't have a onboarding or
exactly,
it's very hard.
So what modern games did is said, okay, well, we still have this infinite fictional space. So here's what we'll do. We'll pick like 75 of those situations and give you a rule for that.
Right.
And that way you don't have to make as many rulings. Or we might even say, we feel that we have covered all the important ones and you shouldn't make any rulings because then you're fucking up the game. So, okay, great. But now I have to learn all these rules and all these rulings.
I don't remember them.
And then, okay. So then what is it about position and effect? Well, the thing about position and effect is it's not either of those. Position and effect says, hey, here's the infinite possibility space of everything that we can do. Okay. And rather than saying, well, only a couple of those do we have rules for, and everything else we have to figure out. And instead of saying, here's 100 rules so that you can cover almost all of those that'll come up and have to remember 100 different rules, all Blades in the Dark says is, as a group, all you need to decide is this situation desperate, risky, or controlled?
Right.
And then the mechanics will work out the same.
Right.
I've given you basically 3 rules, but they apply to everything.
Right.
And so you can funnel anything. You can draw the line from your fictional reality into that. So the GM describes the situation and he says, this is really desperate. You're not going to be able to do this. And he says, you forget. My character was born and raised on the ships of the Southern Sea, right? Leaping from platform to platform, from rope to rope is like second nature to me. Right. And I go, you're absolutely right. This isn't desperate for you. It's risky. We are shifting the fictional space in the mechanics at will. But more important than that, it's still a conversation between the GM and the players.
Right.
But the player has some idea of what the translation is.
Right.
Because they know that what they're trying to do is get it to be risky.
You're not trying to get some arbitrary or abstract bonus from the game master based on how well they're feeling, how considerate they are to your idea. Like the stakes are the same. You're going to land on controlled, risky, or desperate.
Correct.
Right? The only question is where are you going to land? And the way you answer that is through the fiction.
Only through the fiction.
Right.
Only through the fiction.
No mechanics really help.
There's no other way to do it. And so in a way, it's like it doesn't have any rules. It just has this one guiding principle. Yeah. And then everything, once you're in that space, the mechanics are quite clear. You need to learn the 3 rules of what does controlled mean, what does risky mean, what does desperate mean, and then that enables you to just create anything you want from it. So that's one of the reasons why I think that has always been very.
It's a phenomenal tool. I think more GMs should keep that in their pocket, and it's obviously trivial to
and to your point,
make that work with other systems.
And the most important thing about it is, I think Dragonbane, this is the advantage, I think, of Dragonbane, and I also think it's the advantage of 5th edition, even though people fucking hate it for this. In Dragonbane, you get the same thing. Because remember, there's no DC.
Right.
So I'm telling you, make a roll.
Right.
That's risky.
Right.
With a Bane. That's desperate. With a Boon. That's controlled.
Yeah.
You're speaking the same language.
Yeah.
You can be like, you can kind of, push the fiction. Right. You're having a conversation trying to push the GM for the reason why you should have the boon or the Bane. Or the GM is explaining to you why, because of what happened last round and the fiction, he's now giving you a Bane.
Right.
And so we all understand that.
Yeah.
And you may not know the exact way that the odds work. Now, granted, what I love about Blades in the Dark, though, is that doesn't actually affect your chances of success or failure.
Correct.
It's only the consequences.
It's only consequences, which is a very nice touch.
It is a very nice touch.
Because I do think, we talk about this a lot too. A scapegoat for a lot of GMs is to let a player do something at an increased difficulty.
Oh, yeah.
But with no payoff.
Yep. Right.
It's like
case in point, in Blades in the Dark, your character is just as likely to succeed at a controlled action as they are a desperate action. Right. And that seems really fucked up. But then when you think about it in the way that the gameplay, because again, in Dragonbane, I mean, you know the math from 5e very well. Yeah. If the GM says, okay, well, you got a Bane and you have a Bane,
why
are we even rolling?
Pass.
I'll just sit down. How about that? I'm not even going to roll the dice. So what's nice about Blades in the Dark is it's not affecting your chance of success. It's just your how much am I willing to wager on this known quantity of success, which is kind of cool. We did have a Save Versus super chat. Thank you, Save Versus, for $28.01.
Thank you.
Which means that Smith wins. Derek got $0. Actually, $5 of that dollars was for me.
Wait, do we have typicals?
Yeah, the top one is I agree with Smith, and the bottom one was I agree with Derek. I have 0, and you have 50.
Do we have that many different opinions?
Apparently enough that people felt compelled.
I think people just don't know how to tip.
Save Versus says, I prefer a rules light game as long as there is enough other stuff I can use to infer my own rulings. And I don't have to worry about making a ruling, then worry it's OP, and then have to nerf it maybe even later in the session. I would say, that for me, the ideal game would be the game that has no rules. Only the principles and tools that you need to be able to make rulings that your players will understand at a fundamental basis.
So I guess, do you consider Blades in the Dark's conversation scaffolding a rule or a tool?
A tool. I consider it a tool.
Is it a tool for everyone else and a rule in that game, or is it a tool regardless?
That's a great question. That I don't know.
I feel like it's like probably not really up for debate if you're playing Blades in the Dark.
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, I guess in Blades in the Dark, I don't think about that. Well, no, because there's no way, there's no right answer.
Can you play Blades in the Dark without positioning and effect?
No. Well, yes.
Is it Blades in the Dark still?
A lot of people, in fact, one of the biggest mistakes that I've ever said is like, even the book will say like, the first time you play, just make everything risky standard.
Oh, okay.
And I hate that.
That seems like a horrible missed opportunity.
Horrible opportunity.
That's like the reason you play that game.
Right. In fact, a big part of Blades in the Dark, the book is basically showing a situation, explaining a situation at the table, and then giving an example of play of, making it desperate, limited. And then it basically goes, or maybe you would have done this, and showing how you might have come up with a completely different outcome.
Right.
And so it's like, wait, are you telling me there's no right answer? Correct.
Right.
Everything in that game is kind of a ruling.
Yeah.
It depends on your feeling, your tone, the GM thing. But what isn't abstract is how you're going to map that. And when it does get mapped, it's a language that we can all understand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's English, right? At that point.
Right. Well, but also what the consequences are potentially for desperate versus what the consequences are for controlled.
Yeah.
And you get to, and even to the point where you understand, hey, if I make a desperate roll, I get a bonus experience point. So you might be pushing for the desperate roll. And then when you don't get it, you go, well, I'm going to trade position for effect. And it's like, well, how? Oh, well, when I take the shot, I'm going to leap from the moving train, clearly, so I can get a better angle on it.
Right.
And it's like, okay, experience. You got it. You are definitely desperate. It's like, sweet, awesome, and then I'll get my experience point. But I know exactly what that means in the language of the game. So I mean, I agree. I like rules like games too. And I guess like that, but in terms of like inferring the other rulings, it's like, I mean, at a certain point, you're making it up no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm definitely more further to the right, I think.
Yes.
I don't want to have every element be a conversation.
Correct.
I guess, for me,
that's a big deal.
If I wanted to put this in a positive light, I want to have interesting conversations.
Sure.
Right. So I want to skip all the small talk. So like if it's like all something.
Right. To be clear, Blades in the Dark has the fortune roll, which is where you just roll a number of dice equal to your action die. There's no position. There's no effect.
I'm not criticizing Blades in the Dark at all. I'm more of saying like, I don't want every conversation to be about position and effect.
Got it.
Right. And not every conversation in Blades in the Dark is about position and effect.
Yeah. In fact, I would actually say that is one thing there's a big difference between the two of us. And it really comes down to even like the way that you approach the magic system. Because you love the Vancian system.
I do love
and I do not.
System. Yeah.
You like having
I
this.
also love Dying Earth, so that's part of it.
You like Dying Earth. But I mean, but it's not just the Dying Earth part. Part of what I think, part of what you like in these systems is kind of like, I mean, the classic example is when you went to fight Gulthias, the vampire wizard, and you had your scrolls that you purchased, but you didn't tell me, the game master, what they were. You just asked for me to trust you.
Well, you made it very clear what the fight was, and it was going to be, a little bit more on the Descent Overlord side of things. A little bit more antagonistic.
Well, I mean, that was very much in the game. Yeah. He had been spying on you for months.
100%.
So, but my point is,
I mean, that was criticism. In fact, if anything, I respected the challenge, which is why I was like, hey, Derek, like, here's the math. Here's what I spent. I'm giving you everything I can, but
I'm not telling you.
I'm not telling you what I got.
I'm not telling you what I got, and then you bust me out. But what part of it is, and the reason why I say that this is like, you enjoy having this like this fixed known lever that does this thing. It's not open to interpretation and it's not open to decision. It does what it does. You know what I mean? And like there's like this discrete rule that allows you to sort of,
I like that as the baseline,
influence the game. You know, like you go like, I don't want like, and the reason why I say this is because like for me, I love spell systems where it's like everything is we can create whatever magical effect we want. Right. And you're like, no, I want to know that this spell does this thing. And there's no like bullshit with the DM. Right. It just,
I like hard magic systems, right? I like wheel time.
It just does this thing.
Yeah.
And it produces this effect.
Yeah. Every time.
You know, and it's not up to ruling, it's not up to interpretation, right? It just does this thing. And you're like, and I like having that in my pocket so that when the GM presents me with a challenge, you know, I know what's in my tool belt. Yeah. And you kind of view them as silver bullets.
I you know, particularly in combat situations, I actually don't enjoy shenanigans.
Right.
You know, I want to play the game. And
says the guy who picked the lock through the other side with clairvoyance, and
particularly in combat situations.
Okay, fair enough.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure I have at some point, but like I feel like my shenanigans are probably very limited in that context. Exploration, I do like the soft stuff, and that's where I do like more creatively, because you know what, things like that's how it should work. Right? Like it's more of like, I feel like D&D should have covered that and they failed, and so now we have to step in.
All right, so does that mean then that Avatar Legends might be the perfect RPG game for you?
I am a huge fan of Avatar, but
in combat, you kind of stop playing PBTA, right, which is a big complaint that people have,
which I like.
Right, it becomes more of this.
Right,
I wouldn't say it's a super tactical game.
No, not at all.
But you make choices and they do their effect, and again, it's very unique in PBTA because it's an entirely player facing decision. There's no GM involvement, and then you just say, I'm using my lightning bending. It does 3 damage.
I actually think it's a phenomenal
example. And then outside of that, it's all PBTA wishy-wash.
Yeah, I think it's a phenomenal example, particularly if you look at the show, right? Because if you look at the show, when they're fighting each other, it kind of doesn't really matter how big, you know, Zuko's fire blast is, right? Aang's always going to be able to like cut it in half of air, right? So like the combat even in the show for the most part is pretty rigid.
It's pretty,
but like outside of it, it's like, oh, well, we can do that with bending. Oh shit, we can metal bend now. Oh fuck, they're lava bending. Okay, right? You know, like that part's kind of cool. Now, I do want to stress, I do think some people can take shenanigans and use that to just like get away with shit, and I don't like that. Like I don't like cheapening the system, or you know, we talked about earlier on the stream, right? Like look how smart I am, right? Like I think that stuff's kind of lame. Like for me, I like that baseline mostly just so like, hey, we all agree how gravity works, right? We all agree how hard this door is, right? Like the basic elements of the world we don't have to really discuss on either side. Right? Because it's also not like, well, is this door weaker? You know, like I'm like, no, it's a wooden door. It is what it is. We both agree to this, right?
And you're completely correct, because, for example, one of the things I love that I'm, you know, we've only run one session, but we're running Forbidden Lands, and I'm not even thinking. I'm just talking, you know, and we're going into, you know, you guys are going to maybe you're going to that temple, you know, and I describe how the water has flooded in, and you know and the wooden door, you know, all the furniture is soaked, and it's, you know, and the wooden door into the next chamber, which is sitting in, you know, a foot deep of water, you know, has swollen shut. And, you know, your character goes to attack, you know, say, well, I'm going to jam. It's like, oh, it's jammed. You go, oh, I make a might check. And
this is hilarious. This literally just happened in my 4E campaign.
And I can go make a might check.
Right.
Or I can go, it's really jammed and it's a heavy door.
Right.
And, you know, because I'm thinking, oh, this is the doorway into the inner fortress. Yeah, this would be a thicker. I'm like, the door seems thicker and heavier. Take -1 dice.
Right.
Or maybe when we're describing the door, it's not those things. I describe how it looks like it's been split, like someone was trying to break in, and it's been splintered and hacked apart. And, you know, you can see where chunks of gouges of the wood, you know, like that scene from Moria and Fellowship of the Ring when the goblins are first attacking, you know, into the doorway. And then the player goes, all right, I'm going to kick open this door. And maybe they come back at me and say, can I get a bonus dice? You know, can I get 2 bonus dice? That door seems pretty shaken up, pretty busted. And I go, yeah. And because we're able to speak that same language of, we get what this game is. A 6 is a success. Right. More dice means I have a better chance of that. Less dice means I have less of a chance of that. But we can work together to kind of come up with an outcome. I like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm getting at, right? It's like that baseline is where you start, and that's when you can, add in the modifiers. Like it's a wooden door that is swollen because of the water, right? And classic D&D or third edition, right? That'd be like a -2 or +2 to the DC, right? But then that's also where magic comes in, right? And like why is magic cool? Because magic changes the baseline.
Correct.
And that's why I like having the baseline, because then when you introduce magic, it is magical. Right, because it is like, oh no, we are breaking rules. We're doing it with magic. Right. That's super appealing to me. Right.
Correct. And to me, I mean, this comes back to the broader scope, which is why magic is very powerful, and that's why when we get into more modern games, and like it doesn't feel like characters have to pay a price to be magical, I don't like it.
Yeah,
because you used to have to be D4 hit points, no armor.
Right.
That was a big ask when you died at 0.
Right. Well, D4 hit points, no armor, and by the way, you got 1 or 2 spells.
You got 1 or 2 spells.
1, so what else do you do if you're
But even after a couple levels, you're like, you have 1 level 1 spell, 2 level 2, 2 level 2, or 2 level 1. It's like very limited.
Right.
Very powerful, but very limited.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, you can use dart, dagger, and staff as your weapon. You can wear no armor.
Right.
And it's like, you'd almost seem suicidal.
Right.
So when we start getting to this modern world where it's like magic is somehow.
Well, yeah, like PF2, I mean, I don't think I ever ran out of spells, and also I didn't care if I did. I mean,
yeah. I mean, you went ham.
Yeah.
I mean, you cast as many spells as you possibly could.
Yeah.
And even then, you had cantrips and focus spells and infinite reservoirs.
Well, there was one session, and it was higher level, right? We were like at least 6th level, I want to say, at the time, and I went through an entire fight just using cantrips. Part was just to see, like,
does it work?
Well, and the game's balanced off of it.
Sure.
So, yeah, it worked totally fine. Wasn't the most exciting thing, but.
By the way, we did get a $5 tip from Boothby, who says, I'm sure there will be something that I agree with Derik when I go back and watch this. I just felt really bad seeing him at 0.
Yeah, I don't know where the hate is from this. I feel like this was like almost a boring conversation, because we're like, yeah, we mostly agree on these things. We disagree on a couple different things, but again, it's more like preference.
So yeah, I mean,
I don't hate rules. Like, that's the other thing too. I'll say is, it's not like if you're like, hey, we're gonna run a couple sessions of this, I'd be like, fuck that, I'm out. I'm like, sure, I'm in. Sounds great.
I agree.
Like, yeah, I like these games, but
yeah, again, it is something that I struggle with, though.
If you were like, I'm going to run a 2-year campaign, I'd raise an eyebrow. Like, are you, buddy? Are you though?
Right? Am I? Or am I really going to? I think fundamentally, at the end of the day, what it really comes down to, actually, having complex games with built-in progression, feats, powers, special abilities, building points, whatever, as you level up and play the game, can do a lot of heavy lifting in terms of making the game feel like you're going somewhere and doing something. And so you can have what is relatively a pretty boring game without any real world progression and overcoming anything. But as long as you're leveling up and getting new feats, it feels like, I'm getting stronger, whatever. I'm getting more options. If you play a game that has very little mechanics and is very rules light and doesn't have anything in it, then you don't have that heavy lift from the system.
Right.
The campaign has to be good.
Right.
What makes people want to come back and play the next 2 months is because they're really caught up into the battle, or into the ongoing political struggle between the Duke and the elves of the whatever forest. And because the players are trying to play both sides, or whatever, like the case is. Like, if that's why people are showing up to your game system,
it's nothing to do with the rule system.
Then the rule system doesn't matter.
In fact, at a certain point, I don't think I could help but ask people like, why does it matter that we're using this rule system?
Correct. And if your game, but if your game is essentially a series of combat encounters punctuated by moments of descriptive text, then you need some hardcore feat level structure power. Otherwise, people are going to get really bored, and rightfully so, because they're like, dude, we're just pushing buttons, And this, by the way, is a big part of my problem with MMOs. I reach a point, or actually some TTRPGs.
Yeah.
I reach a point where when I go, hey, I'm really enjoying this campaign. And then suddenly one day I don't. Oh, it's because actually I wasn't enjoying the campaign. I was enjoying leveling up. And now I've gotten to the point where I don't really care about all these powers and abilities anymore. Yeah. I've got enough. My character's getting too complicated, or I've realized that my talent tree's maxed out. Why would I keep playing?
Yeah.
And then
which is funny too, right? Because that wasn't how we played EverQuest originally.
No.
We played EverQuest like, the reason I want to level up is because I'm tired of fighting orcs.
Right.
I want to see what's in the next zone.
Correct. But even in that sense, it's more campaign focused.
Oh, sure.
You know, because in the D&D sense, you might, hint at the gray knolls of the Stone Ridge Mountains.
But also consider the other two classes.
It'd be cool to go fight the Stone Ridge Mountain knolls, but we're too low level. We need to level up.
This is why I land in the middle, right? Why I want some crunch and some rules, but I don't want the PF2 extravaganza, right? Because even look at how we played EverQuest. You and I played the most complex fucking character classes in that game.
Sure. Bard and Chanter.
Yes.
Chanter's what up?
We weren't playing the warrior who got nothing.
That's true.
Like, you got all your powers at level 1 until the expansion, and then at level 50, they gave you the martial, whatever they were called.
Sure.
By the way, you were kicking, and if you had a shield, you could shield bash. If you didn't have that, you were just kicking.
Well, right. And so, there's something to be said about us in our personal preferences. We like more complex games. I mean, look at you when you play Skyrim. You literally added a mod that makes you have to take care of the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You have to manage your shit.
Yeah.
Shit resource die.
That's definitely a case of interesting, not fun.
Exactly. But yet you chose to do that.
Well, I was like, I wonder what it'd be like on the road. Turns out really inconvenient.
And you know what? As someone who pooped in holes,
find it was inconvenient?
That I had to dig in the ground myself for months.
Sure.
Yes.
I bet the first couple times you might have been like, this is interesting. And then you're probably like, it's not fun.
First couple times I was like, oh, this is interesting and fun. And then I was like, this isn't fun.
I thought it was fun. It was never fun.
It was never fun. It was just
I just
novel.
used to think it was interesting, and now I don't.
And now I just think it's the worst thing that I've ever experienced in my entire life.
So that was pretty much my my situation in Skyrim.
Scotty P coming in with $25 tip says, I got your back, Derik. Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And in fact, with that tip from Scott, I am going to give it to Mr. Smith at $50 to $30 as we are going to wrap up. So
I really feel like I earned it, but thanks, guys. Thank you for your support. Much appreciated.
So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. And again, I know we went all over the place, but I think we mostly talked about only OSR stuff.
Didn't get back to this guy, but one day.
We still owe, let me be clear, and Aaron and I talked about this. We still owe you guys a Hackmaster Deeper Dive stream.
Yes. And actually, we were excited to do it. We just want to do it right.
Yep. We want to, right. Because we want to, we want to make sure that you can actually see what's going on and that it makes, sort of understand the, understand the mechanics, because that's what we're here to do. But there's a lot of stuff, not just the combat of Hackmaster, that I think is interesting. The spell system is really interesting.
I love the whole build point system.
The BP system is really cool. It's kind of got that modular Fabula Ultima kind of feel in a little bit, in a way.
Like you have a strange amount of control over the leveling process.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really cool.
So I Legend of Five Rings, Forbidden Lands. I love,
sure, yeah. You love that.
I love when you spend your XP.
100%.
I mean, that's just so it's so good for me.
And this is the same concept, just it's Hackmaster, so there's an extra step.
Yeah, of course, exactly. Yes, there's an extra.
That's the best way to describe Hackmaster.
Yes, just like just like D&D
with an extra step.
So yeah, it's awesome. But thanks so much to our incredible patrons. Thank you to everybody who came out tonight and tipped and supported. Save Versus, Pumpkin, Grimlocked, Scott P, Booth B, maybe a couple others whose names aren't up on my stream anymore. But
and thanks to Josh, our new adventurer.
Yeah, and thank you to Jesse, who is our new patron.
Yes.
We got a $5 super chat coming in from Elia. Elia says, I agree with you that. Oh, sorry. I agree with the you that agrees with me. Okay. So she agrees with the part that we agree with her. Okay. Yeah, okay, got it. Fun stream. Also, if you aren't modding the crap out of Skyrim, what are you even doing?
Not playing Skyrim. At this point, Bethesda counts on it.
This is my favorite thing. Skyrim came out, and I know. Wait. I know this.
You know the date.
I know the date because it was his freaking wedding. So it was 11/11/2011.
Yep.
And you might say, oh, wow, how convenient. Aaron got married on the date Skyrim came out. No, That date was deliberately chosen because it was the date Skyrim was coming out,
Right.
and
By my wife, not by me.
By his wife, because she said, and I quote, "This way he'll always remember our wedding anniversary." And you might think, well, that seems awfully cool to have the wedding then on the day of the game that because even when I first met Aaron back in junior high, you were playing Arena.
Yeah,
and Daggerfall, and then Morrowind, and then Oblivion, and now then Skyrim.
I love Elder Scrolls.
Right, you were always an Elder Scrolls guy, so you might think, okay, so that's kind of a maybe that's a dick move from Mrs. Smith to have the wedding on the day. He's sitting there at the wedding having to not play. Au contraire, my friends. They brought an Xbox.
Yes, to the honeymoon.
To the honeymoon.
I did not play on our wedding day.
You did not play.
It was in our wedding photos.
It wasn't your wedding photos. As an homage to your new beautiful wife, you said, I won't play it today, but tomorrow,
yes,
on our honeymoon,
we'll play it.
Well, I'm playing it.
Yes.
And sure enough, I think you went to Florida or one of the islands.
We went to California.
Oh, you went to California. Okay. Yeah. I remember somewhere warm.
Yeah.
And you guys got the bungalow and you had your Xbox and you were playing Skyrim. Anyway.
She played too,
So you've had this game for 13 years, give or take. Mm-hmm. And you're still playing it to this day, regularly. And have you ever beaten it?
Not only have I not beaten it,
okay,
I've barely gotten past the initial opening quests.
This is wild.
Basically, the furthest I've gotten in that game is actually becoming Dragonborn, which is kind of like where the game starts. I didn't even really know the plot points of it because somehow I haven't been spoiled by it, and I never looked it up. But yeah, never beat the game, never got anywhere in the expansions.
Right.
Yeah.
Josh says the OSR way of playing Skyrim, basically.
Well, that's how I've always played it.
And then Pumpkin says, well, the main quest in Skyrim kind of sucks, to be honest, anyway. So you're not
I think it involves time travel and dragons, so probably something I would enjoy, actually. But
it's probably true. But anyway, that was that story always never ceases to amuse me. But yeah, so
also great forethought from my wife because she was so right. Because to this day, I cannot remember the birthdays of my children. And it's actually a problem because I had to go to the pharmacist the other day. Or not the pharmacist. The pharmacist.
Oh, and they asked for their date of birth.
Yeah, asked for date of birth. And I got, I always get my wife's wrong. I mix her year and the day up all the time. And I got Sebastian's birthday off by a month. Right. So the guy, it's late at night, CVS, right? So it's a 24-hour pharmacy. And, this guy's clearly just like, why the fuck am I working here? What am I doing with my life? Which I totally respect. So this dumbass pulls up and I'm like, yeah, I'm off by a month. Okay. And then he's like, all right, can you spell your kid's name? And I start spelling Sebastian. And then I psyched myself out because I'd already fucked up so much. Where I was like, hold on, let me look this up, right? And the dude is just like, come on, man. What are you doing? I'm just like, I'm sorry, man. I'm just a mess, right? I'm not sure it was legal because I didn't get the birthday right or the name. And they're like, you know what? You tried. Here's the drugs.
Right.
And the guy was like, don't worry, I won't tell your wife.
Right. Exactly. It's one of those. Look, we've seen this before.
No one's gonna con this badly.
Right.
Like,
yeah. If you're trying,
he has to be the father because he's this incompetent.
It's this scam. This can't be a scam.
Yeah.
But yes. But anyway,
I've also forgotten my own birthday and not gone to my own birthday party.
There you go.
Which you went to my birthday party. I heard it was a great party.
Right. You did not show up.
I did not show up.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes. That was nice.
So
we had a nice dinner.
Yeah. Glad it was good.
So thank you, Elia, for that. But yes, anyways, thank you for everybody who supported us. Thank you for our incredible patrons. Shout out to our good friend Overlord, who has been with the Knights of Last Call for almost the entire time we've been around, and has been a hero the whole time, and just recently upgraded to Exalted. We haven't heard from him in a while, but it was really awesome to see that support from him, and he said some very nice words about us. So Overlord, if you're listening, you know who you are. Thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. And to all of our patrons, whether you're new or old, you mean the world to us, and that's how we're able to keep doing this. So I think that's going to do it for us. Mr. Smith, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
And
Bob, hope you're feeling better.
We will be back. We'll be back Thursday with I don't know what, probably a Patreon poll. I don't know what we're going to talk to about. There's not as much to talk about. We've talked about it all.
Yeah, I mean, we're digging back 50 years now.
So. I mean, right? We're going back.
We're about to shut down.
You know
the channel.
what? To be clear, even Rules Lawyer is out there talking about the third edition D&D and what changed between AD&D second edition and D&D third edition.
That is a niche conversation.
It is a niche conversation. That's a Knights of Last Call conversation.
We lived that conversion, and I don't care about that.
Yeah. So we will see you then. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Bye, everybody. Peace.